key aspect of global markets in 2020. Global central bank stimulus continues, supports risk assets at a time of slow but steady economic growth. The question is, do you go all in? Is cash trash, as Ray Dalio says? Do you go all into risk assets, or do you sort of hold back given the fact that we do seem to be heading later into the economic cycle? David Sowerby joining us now, Anchor Managing Director and Portfolio Manager. And what's your take on that? Is it time to...
If we add to Ray Dalio's comment, cash is trash, fill in the blank, net of inflation, net of taxes, your return is zero or even negative, yes, then cash is absolutely trash.
That's catchy.
Net of inflation and taxes, that's the biggest enemy for the long-term investor. Always inflation and taxes are your biggest enemy. And if stocks are going to compound between 6 and 7% for the next 2 or 3 years, where am I going to get a better return than that? It's hard to find.
So, all right. So, David, I think that's what a lot of investors are saying is, boy, I had a great 2019. Even after adjusting for the fourth quarter of 2018, I had a great performance. Do I take some cash off the table? Do I get defensive? What are you suggesting to investors right here?
On the margin, you can get, let's call it somewhat defensive, aggressive defense maybe. And that may just be trades within your portfolio, sell the stocks that have done quite well where the valuation is getting priced for sainthood, and begin to look more into the small cap, leaning value segment of the market.
Priced for sainthood. I really like that.
There are a few stocks out there that are high momentum, that are priced for perfection, priced for sainthood.
What's that?
I think in the telecom and in the media space, there's certainly the FANGs, and for the most part, that are priced for sainthood, though I do own Apple in the mutual fund that I co-manage, because I think the free cash flow yield is still quite compelling, and it's more of a value stock than a growth stock.
Wait, hold on a second. So you're saying that it's time to kind of perhaps get rid of some Facebook, Netflix, and Google shares, Alphabet?
On the margin, I think Facebook would be one. You can make a modified case for Netflix, more so for Google, but I think there's some pockets of the market that are getting rich. But even in the low volatility consumer staples area, I think there's just as many stocks there that are.
Well, that's the thing.
Rich.
I mean, I think defensive sectors that we've heard for, I would say, 6 to 9 months, whether it's consumer staples, utilities, REITs, people have been telling us those are expensive by historical measures for a long time. So I'm not sure where I go here if I want to get defensive.
Well, I'll give you a couple ideas.
Other than energy.
Well, in finance. Now, these aren't the most household names, but Discover Financial will report after the close today. I own it in the mutual fund that I co-manage. It's been a phenomenal performer since it spun out of Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. It has trounced American Express over the last 10 years. It is much more consumer-oriented, where I think consumer free cash flow is quite healthy. The consumer balance sheet is quite healthy. And Discover is a financial name along with another like Citizens Financial, which is a regional bank that concentrates in where I think growth is in the middle markets. It's not JP Morgan and it's not Citigroup, but I think those are more value-leaning ideas.
What are acceptable returns to expect from an equity portfolio going forward the next 2 to 5 years?
6 to 7%. And if you're an alpha seeker like me, who will own 35 stocks in a portfolio, not 500, then I think it's closer to 7% annualized.
And what's the potential for a really big drawdown?
Less than 20%. We still have too many investors who are gun shy and whipsawed from 2000, 50% drop, 2008, 50% drop, and they're waiting for the next one. They may be waiting a long time. We'll get the 20% drop. I mean, we came pennies from that in 2018. Yep. But the 20% drop, I don't like it, but I can grind through it. The 50% drop is what freezes me like a deer in the headlights. So most investors.
Like most investors, right? David, one of the names on your list in your mutual fund is Amgen. And biotech just fascinates me. I mean, just because of the risk reward, the volatility. Is Amgen, given that there's so much bigger than a typical biotech, what's your view? How do you think about Amgen? Are you waiting for the next big drug? Or are you saying, hey, I like the portfolio of drugs in Amgen?
The portfolio of drugs that I can get Amgen at a valuation of 15 times this year's earnings, a better than 5% free cash flow yield, growing the dividend at a double-digit rate when most companies are growing the dividend at 7%. And when I would have been more cautious in the biotechs, I think the valuations and with the valuation separations in names like Amgen, ABBV is another name, I think that's compelling. Then biotech becomes much more interesting as a place when I may only own 5 or 6 healthcare stocks in my portfolio.
One question has been the incredible leverage that's been building up in corporate America and how, by many measures, it's at record high levels, even relative to immediately leading up to the financial crisis. Does that weigh into your calculus at all when you decide what stocks to buy?
The later in the cycle that we get, the more I'm going to pay attention in the stocks I'm going to buy on things like free cash flow interest coverage. That I don't want companies that are spending like drunken sailors. I want companies that are judicious in their capital allocation and not taking on too much debt. I liken it to free beer. If I got 2 free beers, that's great. If I get 7 or 8 free beers, the outcome's not so bad. And I think that's a little bit of the case in low debt.
But do you think that there are a lot of companies acting like drunken sailors?
Pound for pound, not yet. I think companies are still judicious in their capital allocation, whether it's a share repurchase or a dividend increase or a sensible, not a value-destroying acquisition or capital expenditures. Most companies are still saying the magic words to me, which is I'm paying attention to my cash flow and my free cash flow, and that's how I'm going to drive shareholder value. There's a few outliers, but pound for pound, based on free cash flow margins still being quite healthy in the economy, in particular, 10, as much as 15%, companies are growing their free cash flow margin healthy. At the same time, they're still seeing 5 to 6% revenue growth. I like that.
So, David, that's kind of where I wanted to go. Earnings. We think about the performance in 2019, mostly multiple expansion in the market, not much earnings growth to talk about, really putting the pressure on corporate America to deliver those earnings in 2020. What's your view of kind of corporate America earnings growth for 2020?
The consensus, by my estimate, is still about 9 or 10%. I'm going to think it's more in the 7% range. But I'll give you an example. Paul, a month ago, I was much more concerned that the consensus was just too high for 2020. Now, we're maybe top of the second inning in this earnings season, but for the most part, companies are giving favorable guidance. Their earnings are beating, and it leads me to 2020, which is 7% earnings growth. We won't get PE expansion, and maybe that's pretty close to the number we'll see in the market this year, though we're certainly off to a very positive start.
I want to just note that as we're talking in the initial 10 minutes of trading, 9 minutes of trading, stocks are selling off, actually, and losses deepening across the major U.S. equity indices, and people pointing to the virus that is spreading from China. There was a confirmed case in Vietnam confirming 2 coronavirus infection cases, so it does appear to be spreading. I'm wondering how this factors in. I mean, something like this where it sort of hits the services sectors, the travel sectors, and frankly, this is a risk that's growing and increasing for a lot of medical professionals and beyond.
Lisa, you pointed it out right at the beginning. You said the number was about 800 deaths from SARS. We're very early in this, and simply it's too hard to model. It's too much of an unknown. But even in a period of unknown, I'm going to take a look at my portfolio and say, just what's my China exposure and how much that may impact me in the short term versus the long term, knowing that my average period for holding a stock is about 4 years.
So one of the things that we, a lot of times I'm looking for value in 2020. Everything's kind of run.
I love value.
Do I dip my toe in energy?
It's a way of life, Paul.
Do I dip my toe in energy?
Not yet.
Okay.
And I'm first to admit, nobody can forecast oil prices. Some people think they can and they have to, but nobody can. But if you look at the valuations, then they become compelling. So, for example, if you look at the filings, we own Marathon Petroleum, which is the refiner. I like the fact that you have an activist involved there and they're spinning out their retail division. That's a name that's compelling. It's done well in the long term, but in the last 12 months, it's lagged.
David Sowerby, thank you so much for being with us. You're sticking with us. And coming up, I want to get your sense on what we heard from Bridgewater's Bob Prince, about the idea of the boom and bust cycle being over. You'll get your chance to actually weigh in on that shortly. David Sowerby is anchor and managing director and portfolio manager. Right now, though, let's get a check of what's going on outside the business world. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Paul. House Democrats prosecuting President Donald Trump's impeachment trial are preparing for a second day of arguments. Democrats allege a corrupt scheme by Trump involving Ukraine. New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries is one of the House impeachment managers.
The framers of the Constitution, I think, did not want a king. They did not want a dictator. They did not want a monarch. They wanted a democracy.
Each side has 24 hours over 3 days to make its case. Trump's defense team is eager for its turn, likely to begin Saturday. China closed off a city of more than 11 million people today, halting transportation and warning against public gatherings to try to stop the spread of the deadly coronavirus. And now there's a confirmed case in Singapore. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says nations must take action now to keep the virus contained.
We stress to them that by having a strong action, not only they will control the outbreak in their country, but they will also minimize the chances of this outbreak spreading internationally.
The coronavirus has killed 17, sickened hundreds in China, and spread to other countries, including the U.S. The Virginia State Senate voted to advance a red flag law bill, one of many gun safety measures Democrats are looking to move through the state legislature after taking control of both chambers. The bill creates a procedure for authorities to apply for an emergency order to prohibit a person who poses a substantial risk of injuring himself or others from purchasing, possessing, or transporting a firearm. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Paul, Lisa?
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Right now we are seeing the NASDAQ and S&P both down about 0.5%. Dow Jones down about 0.6%. We are looking at a rally in bonds, in particular more on the short end of the yield curve. 2-year yields down the most since January 3rd, since the beginning of the month, to the lowest since October of last year, currently 1.493%. Paul?
I'm also looking at oil, Lisa. WTI oil, $54.88, off 3.5%, 3.3% right now. So a big pullback in oil as well.
Yeah, people concerned about a number of different issues, the oversupply, the lack of travel as a result of some of the concerns about the virus. As Michael Barr was just saying, Vietnam has confirmed 2 cases of coronavirus, as it does appear that it's spreading. That said, we really have to say it does not seem to be as fatal as SARS. Right. I'm Lisa Abramowitz with Pulse Whitney. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop brand continues to grow. Its latest expansion is a 6-episode Netflix series devoted to the wellness theories and practices promoted on the company's website and in its newsletter. The show focuses on the Goop staff as they test activities like yoga in the snow or try out new therapies like sampling psychedelics in the Jamaican sun. Each episode of the Goop Lab begins with a disclaimer about how they're designed to entertain and inform, not provide medical advice. One thing that needs no disclaimers whatsoever is the Audi R8 V10 Performance Coupe, writes Bloomberg car columnist Hannah Elliott. Though the $200,000 car has been only lightly updated since its last major facelift in 2012, Elliott says it remains an example of superior styling, elegant handling, and it features flawless entertainment and navigation systems. The 0 to 60 sprint time is 3.2 seconds. The car has a whopping 602 horsepower. Its top speed is 200 miles an hour. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Global news 24 hours.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Want to kit out your new kitchen for less? Get to B&Q. We've 20% off all kitchen sinks, taps and appliances when you spend £2,500 on a beautifully designed and affordable good home kitchen. Hurry, offer ends 2nd of February. You can do it when you B&Q it. In-store orders only, maximum 10 appliances, excludes clearance, see DIY.com.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and stocks are slumping following losses in Europe and Asia amid growing concern that a virus spreading from China could drag on global growth. Treasuries are climbing, crude is dropping. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 0.5% or 15 points at 3306. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.6% or 162 points at 29,026. And the Nasdaq is down 0.4% or 35 points at 9347. 10-year Treasury up 13.30 seconds, yield 1.72%. The yield on the 2-year 1.49%. NYMEX crude oil is down 3.33% on $1.91 at $54.83 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.33%, up $5.50 at $15.6220 an ounce. The euro 1.1070 against the dollar. The yen is at 109.38. And China's Shanghai Composite Index plunged 2.8% on the last trading day before the Lunar New Year holiday, its biggest drop in 8 months. Pessimism about the economy among U.S. consumers fell in January to an almost 18-year low as record stock prices and a strong job market lift current sentiment, which held at the highest level since 2000. The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort monthly economic expectations gauge held close to a more than 1-year high, as only 22% of respondents said the economy was getting worse. And watching shares of Procter & Gamble, they're down 0.25% right now as investors focus on a revenue miss instead of an optimistic forecast. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa.
Karen Moscow, thank you so much. We appreciate that report. Still with us, David Sowerby, Ancora Managing Director and Portfolio Manager in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. David, 2020, an election year. Do investors need to care? Do they need to position themselves certain ways? How should we think about elections and impacts on the market?
I will get the majority of questions on the election without being specific. If this candidate wins, are we going to sell everything? Names withheld.
Yep.
And the right answer, I think, is don't underestimate that good companies will generate shareholder return in the face of poor politics out of Washington. As a portfolio manager, I always expect Washington to do the least amount that they need to do to fix a problem. But that said, if we saw an outcome in an election that reduced competitiveness and capitalism in the U.S., then I think maybe cash, as we talked about before, is not trash, but becomes something as a safe haven in your portfolio.
Just quickly here, Bob Prince, the co-CIO of Bridgewater Associates, was on Bloomberg Television yesterday from Davos saying that the boom-bust cycle as we know it is over. Do you agree?
If a bear market is 20% down and a bust is, let's call it 50% down, the probability of that is less than 10%, I think. We saw it twice in the decade of 2000. We saw it in 1973, 74. The probability is quite low because we just don't have the external events that would lead to that kind of bust. Valuations are not too rich. Leverage is an issue, but not too excessive. Fiscal policy in the U.S. is more favorable at this point than not on taxes and regulation. It's hard to see that 50% bust.
David Sowerby, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming into our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. And Core Managing Director, Portfolio Manager David Sowerby. I want to switch gears a little bit. The coronavirus obviously is an issue for the market where we think it's certainly one of the drivers of the underperformance of the markets today. We welcome Max Neeson, Bloomberg opinion columnist. He covers all things healthcare, out with a really interesting column today talking about the big pharma companies and what role do they play? How do they view some of these global viruses and kind of what's in their forecast for is, kind of how they deal with them. So, Max, thanks so much for joining us here. Give us a sense of kind of how the big pharma companies think about some of these viruses that seem to be happening perhaps a little bit more often.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I highlighted is that, after years of consolidation and the market rewarding companies that become sort of more narrowly focused on specific markets, more lucrative ones, cancer medicines, rare disease medicines coming to mind. There are only 4 of the really big pharma companies that have major vaccine units anymore. And then if you look at another area of concern, not this time around, but in the future, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, a number of large pharmaceutical companies have gotten out of the business of trying to develop new antibiotics. And, these are the areas that are going to be of great concern in the future as we get, more of these types of outbreaks. And the companies that have the most resources, the ability to move the fastest, the most kind of combined expertise and actually ability to get up to scale for any sort of medical response, fewer of them have the capability or the willingness to participate.
Is this issue just simply it's not that profitable, given the fact that everybody's saying if you're going to provide vaccines, they have to be affordable so we can actually go out and stop different viruses?
That's precisely the issue. And the one that comes into play here is the fact that, if by the time we develop a vaccine for this particular outbreak of coronavirus, and get into early stage human tests, that might be a couple months from now, and then it starts to fade away. Saw this happen with SARS. No big pharma company developed the phase 1 SARS vaccine.
There is an argument to be made for, and people are making it, for a nationalized vaccine kind of program so that it's not necessarily about profits, and you don't end up with, say, a vaccine that costs so much that only people who are in a certain tier of income can actually afford it. How realistic is that? I mean, is that what you think is the viable solution?
I think it's probably the best solution in the very long run. But the problem is, you have these government organizations, the NIH, stuff like that. They're great at the first step, at getting a vaccine candidate, a viable one. The next step, actually, running trials and getting to production level, that's something that, they just don't have the expertise. You can develop that, but that's something that's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. I think it's something that is arguably a really good priority. That's something you want to spend government money on not having to rely on companies that have a profit motive and don't have incentives to invest in this kind of research or production capacity. But that is something that's going to take a long time. In the meantime, you have to be able to kind of have this public-private partnership to have companies that not just have the capability, but are willing and have incentives to be partners, to participate in this. I think it's sort of telling that you have companies that are starting to work on vaccine. You're seeing all these little biotechs pop. They're tiny companies that, for the most part, have not actually developed successfully a product that's approved by the FDA on the market.
It's such a tricky thing because one engine of innovation is the chance to make a lot of money, right, for a lot of these drugs. Yep. If you take that away, then what's the upside? What's the incentive? But if you don't, if you sort of nationalize it, then are you going to get the same kind of innovation that's required? And Max, we have to have you back and discuss this more in depth, because I got to say, this is a huge issue, and will only become more so as people start to look at global travel and some potential for a pandemic. Max Neeson is a Bloomberg opinion columnist covering all things healthcare, biotech, et cetera, for us here at Bloomberg. You can read his columns. They're fabulous. OPIN go on the Bloomberg. Always wonderful to get his thoughts here. Bloomberg.com/opinion. Bloomberg Surveillance here. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with my co-host and colleague, Paul Sweeney.
Message and data rate may apply.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value, with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 6-pack of Mr. Kipling Angel Slices, now half price, from £1.80 to just 90p. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
On the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot,
from regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Where's your views on the municipal bond landscape?
The market does not like uncertainty, does not react well to uncertainty.
There's a whole lot of optimism around the valuation of Uber.
What is Ford saying about the self-driving car?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Maybe we're getting hooked on debt and low interest rates.
The black hole called power could be a bigger black hole.
A toxic brew of slower revenue growth.
There is now this belief that Amazon maybe can do anything.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Thursday morning from New York City to our worldwide audience. Coming up, Jonathan Ferro, Bloomberg Television, will sit down with Department of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in Davos. We will bring that to you. Plus, we'll get the latest economic data for the month of December. But first, let's go to John Tucker of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. John, what do you have?
Yeah, and Paul, it is red on the screen, this Bloomberg Business Flash, being brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, providing industry partners with commercially focused research and innovation services through its New Jersey Innovation Institute. More at njii.com. Well, we have pessimism about the U.S. economy and the outlook for stocks after the recent record runs. Investors taking a bit of a pause today. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 134 points. That's down about 0.5%. We're at 29,050. The S&P 500, 11 points lower. That's down 0.3%. We're at 3310, and the Nasdaq Composite Index 20 points lower. That's down 0.2%. We're at 9363. Investors grappling with fears of the coronavirus possibly spreading. Also, we got data on jobless claims edging higher last week. That story from Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Even with the increase, jobless claims are historically low and look to be that way for some time. Last week's tally, 211,000, just 6,000 higher than the government's prior report. The long and short, today's data are consistent with the Federal Reserve's view that the labor market is tight. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
And more earnings. Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase all fell more than 1% to lead the market lower. Now we got earnings from Comcast and Travelers, both reporting better than expected quarterly figures. However, both stocks, they are down right now. Once again, the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 133 points. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, John Tucker. Market Drive is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth the #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. And as John was saying, there is red, although it is clawing back from earlier lows of the NASDAQ, now just down 0.2%, had been down as much as 0.6% after the immediate open. And I'm wondering, Dave Wilson, Bloomberg stocks editor, who's joining us here in studios, is whether this really is an issue with the coronavirus, and it could really be linked to the Vietnam announcement that they are confirming 2 cases of the coronavirus in that country, or is this stemming just from a pause right now as people assess how much further the rally can go?
Probably more the latter, and I say that just looking at one group of stocks that is particularly susceptible to the latest information on the outbreak, and that would be the shares of companies that operate casinos in the Chinese city of Macau. I mean, you've got the Lunar New Year holiday coming up, a time when you'd expect people to be traveling in from the mainland, taking advantage of the holiday. And we saw the stocks take a hit before the opening bell, but they bounced back quite a bit. You take Wynn Resorts as an example there, just looking at how today's trading has gone for this company. You see the shares were down 4.7% early on. Now they're only lower by a little more than 2%. So, the concern is there. It's not as severe in terms of price moves as what we saw earlier in the week when this whole virus issue really started kind of coming to prominence, you might say. It's one concern among others at this point, as far as where things are headed.
Also saw, a name we like to follow is General Electric. GE actually rising today. They got an upgrade from Morgan Stanley, and that's helping that stock today.
Well, that's what happens when you decide a company is a turnaround rather than, a financial wreck. In essence, that's what the firm decided And so those shares are higher in early trading. And you've got some pluses as far as earnings go as well. The most notable one, biggest gain, the S&P 500 is Citrix Systems. This is a company that does remote access software, so you can tap into your corporate network from your cell phone or your laptop or whatever. And their numbers were pretty well received. And shares are up 6.5%.
I have to wonder about Apple because this is one of the key drivers of recent gains, at least in 2019. And then today, you are seeing some analysts coming out and saying, it seems like these valuations are pretty high at this time without some new information. What are you hearing on that front, considering how big of a component in the NASDAQ and S&P this particular company is?
Well, as far as that goes, you're now talking about a company that's almost $1.4 trillion in market value. And, shares are up still about 8% this year, even with the way they're backing off in early trading. And I say backing off because it's not all that much of a hit. The stock's down, sure, but you're talking, 0.25%, and that's all. So, the bigger question is what may happen once we get Apple's results, and they're due next week.
Well, just to give you some sense, so KeyBank Capital Markets came out and saying there is a perception of relative safety in Apple. But that said, given the historically high valuations, that may not be the case. Is there a growing feeling that this is sort of the situation we're in, which is it's a totally solid company. It has a cash stash that's the size of another country, but still, it's just that's all been priced in.
Yeah, it's a stock that in essence has gone through a change over the years in how investors see it because, it was the shining example of a growth company. And then, people, they bought the iPhones. They didn't necessarily buy the new model every year. And, the company started paying out dividends and buying back shares. So increasingly, it's kind of become more of a value stock, the kind of, shares that you buy based on relatively low valuations, and low in this case is relative to their growth rate. So, they're kind of betwixt and between, arguably, at this point. And like I say, though, that market value figure is just staggering, and it tells you, just how well the company's shares have done and how much there might be to lose if things really, start slowing up in terms of people's demand for smartphones and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ANR function on the Bloomberg terminal here, and it looks like the stock is well ahead of where the sell-side analyst community is. Stock's trading about $317 right now. The average price target, 12-month price target, is $296 for the stock. So the stock's well above where the street thinks it should be, suggesting that, maybe by that one measure, it's ahead of itself a little bit.
And we should point out that most of the analysts are still saying buy the stock. So that tells you something.
What does it tell you? I'm not sure what that tells you.
It tells you that, to the extent that there's optimism on Apple, it's sort of less pronounced when you throw in the target price than, the pessimism would be.
Tesla, are we going to see that being the next, watch company to be $1 trillion?
Oh, it's a long way from there. The bigger question is how many of Elon Musk's, bits of pay does he get out of this package in 2018? There's 12 different thresholds. The first one is that $100 billion market value. It looked early on today like Tesla might, fall below it. And sure enough, it's popped right back up. Looking at the moment, the shares are higher by 1.4%. So you're talking a third straight gain. And
a market cap of $104 billion.
Indeed.
It's getting there. Getting to that trillion, just $900 billion and more to go. I will say, we're all watching Elon Musk's pay package eagerly on tenterhooks, worried about him, making sure he gets that so that he can pay back loans and do some other things. Yes. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor, thank you so much for being with us here in our Interactive Brokers studios. And I will just say there is a bid in bonds that persists despite the fact that we've seen a little bit of bounce back from the earlier risk-off feel in the day. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with world and national headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, House Democrats are preparing preparing for a second day of arguments in President Trump's Senate impeachment trial. Lead House Manager Adam Schiff opened his party's case, portraying the president as vindictive, untruthful, and unbound by law.
President Trump solicited foreign interference in our democratic elections, abusing the power of his office to seek help from abroad to improve his reelection prospects at home. And when he was caught, he used the powers of that office to obstruct the investigation into his own misconduct.
How's the message being received by Senate jurors? Republican Tim Scott says he didn't hear anything new.
The goal of this entire process is not to remove the president from office. It's simply to remove certain Republican senators, Colorado, North Carolina, Iowa, Maine, and Arizona from office. And this is absolutely an opportunity for them to try to overtake the Senate.
Today's arguments will focus on abuse of power and persuading Republicans to allow witness testimony. Travel restrictions are spreading in China as the deadly coronavirus spreads to more places. Singapore has reported its first case, and the city where the outbreak began, Wuhan, is on virtual lockdown. The head of the World Health Organization says countries need to do more to contain the outbreak.
By having a strong action, not only they will control the outbreak in their country, but they will also minimize the chances of this outbreak spreading internationally.
The WHO has held off on declaring the virus a public health emergency of international concern. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
In the real world, there are no rabbits in hats, crystal balls, or cards that turn into money. Instead, you get business information from top-tier analysts and experts.
What should expectations be for this latest round of negotiations?
That's actually better, isn't it?
They're both trying to say they have the upper hand.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you...
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Get to TradePoint for 20% off kitchen sinks, taps and appliances when you spend £2,500 or more on a kitchen. Plus, 10% trade loyalty discount will be applied instantly for all TradePoint members. So for a great deal on kitchens, get to TradePoint. In-store orders only, maximum 10 appliances, excludes clearance, ends 2nd of February. See tradepoint.co.uk.
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Red on the screen, stocks, the major averages are lower, but not the worst levels of the session. Stocks open lower. Rising worries over the coronavirus outbreak in China seems to be among the concerns on investors. That's prompted a lockdown of 2 cities in China. Also, you had a mixed bag of results, adding to somewhat dour sentiment right now. As we look at the earnings season, S&P 500, so far 76 companies of the 500 in the S&P 500 have reported. About 50 to about 70% have had positive earnings surprises. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average 107 points lower. That's down 0.4%. We're at 29,077. S&P 500 9 points lower. That's down 0.3%. At 3312, the Nasdaq Composite Index down 9 points. That's down 0.1% at 93.73. A pop in volatility is measured by the VIX right now, up 4.8%. The yen is up 0.4% against the U.S. dollar, reflecting some of the risk-off sentiment out there. 10-year yield 173. The price is up by 10.30 seconds. The yield down by 3 basis points. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We We are awaiting an interview by Bloomberg television anchor Jonathan Ferro. He's going to sit down with the Department of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in Davos, talking about the U.S. economy. And I suspect that Secretary Ross can, with some confidence, take a kind of a victory lap, if you will, Lisa, about the U.S. economy. We've heard some very positive things coming from Davos about the U.S. economy relative to other parts of the world as it relates to, kind of a 2% plus kind of GDP growth, moderate inflation, rising financial markets. So I'm sure that will be some positive commentary coming out of Mr. Ross.
I'm sure he'll want to do that and take a victory lap. I'm sure John Ferro is going to press him on a bunch of other things.
Yes.
And I think that probably one of the issues is just the tack that the U.S. is taking with respect to Europe, given the fact that President Trump took a hard line, at least in speech. But people saying it's unlikely he is going to take a similarly hard line as he did with China ahead of the U.S. election. Still, a lot of questions about how that could affect Germany's auto sector. Definitely also a question of what might be next in order to propel the economy even higher, given how late we are in this stage. So in Davos, Jonathan Ferro has been doing a number of really interesting interviews along with Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix and a host of other anchors. Really interesting to hear Department of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television from Davos. Let's go to them.
From Davos, Switzerland, for our audience worldwide, live from the World Economic Forum on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. The conversations continue, and a fantastic guest joins us right now in our studio. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Secretary Ross, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Always good to catch up with you, sir. Let's just start things out with what got my attention this week. Tuesday, America kind of soft on Europe. Wednesday, a whole lot firmer. What happened in that bilateral?
Well, we're neither soft nor firmer. The president has made it clear he really wants this to be brought to a head very quickly, hopefully in a very positive manner. And that's all that's going on.
What are the objectives?
Objectives are the same as they've always been. We have problems with standards. We have problems with tariffs. We have problems with a number of other non-tariff trade barriers.
A lot of problems, Secretary Ross. How do you achieve those objectives so quickly?
Well, it's not a question of so quickly. Everybody's known the issues for years and years. It isn't like we're just inventing these issues.
Well, let's talk about some of the issues on the table at the moment. The president is unhappy with the digital tax coming out of France. Secretary Mnuchin said the following. I want to read that quote to you because I think it's really important. If people want to just arbitrarily put taxes on our digital companies, we will consider arbitrarily putting taxes on car companies. Can you arbitrarily put taxes on car companies?
Well, first of all, it's not arbitrary.
The Secretary's words, not mine.
We went through a whole process with the 232 investigation of autos. President has digested that. We have a perfect justification to put tariffs on if we wish to. President had decided it was better to negotiate. We've had very constructive negotiations with the German car manufacturers, with the Korean, and with the Japanese. So far, we haven't felt a need to do it. But if people do silly things, if they do protectionist and discriminatory things like the Pillar 1 of the digital service tax, we obviously are going to respond.
Well, let's talk about the Section 232 investigation. Self-imposed deadline the middle of November. From what you've just said, from what I'm hearing, is that the outcome of that investigation was that it is a national security risk at the moment. Is that true?
The president so announced, yes.
Where's the follow-through? Because the middle of November is when we expected to see the follow-through. And now people look at the self-imposed deadline and say, well, it's expired. The administration can't use Section 232 anymore because that deadline has expired.
Well, they simply don't understand Section 232.
Walk us through it.
What was needed in November was for the president to decide on a path forward. He did. He decided the path forward was to negotiate as long as that was bearing fruit, rather than just immediately put in something else.
But your interpretation of the legal issues is that Section 232 in that investigation still applies.
Absolutely.
Even though the self-imposed deadline has come and gone. This
is an imaginary deadline. The deadline was that he would take a decision. He took a decision. Period.
Well, let's talk about what could happen and what would need to happen to stop those auto tariffs from going on. as things stand currently, the tariff for cars coming out of the United States into Europe is 10%, as you know, and the tariff for autos coming out of Europe into the United States, I believe, is 2.5%. There are some big truck tariffs there, some SUV tariffs for the United States that really skew a lot of this. What would you like to see from the Europeans in the coming months to put things to one side and move on?
Well, first of all, this digital service thing clearly is meant to be discriminatory. There are very few companies in the whole world other than the American companies that fit that definition. So the clear intent was to be discriminatory. We have other laws that also enable us to retaliate against discriminatory behavior. If there is discriminatory behavior, we will fight back. Forget anything else.
Is that a red line? If the French go through with this, they've delayed it, but if they go through with it, is that a red line for this administration?
Well, that's up to the president to decide at the time. It depends what else is going on. But it is clear that this is a protectionist and discriminatory proposal that was made.
You're there in the room with the president a lot of the time as he meets EU officials. Has he told them that that's a red line?
He doesn't use terms like red line.
What does he say to them? Take us inside the room. What does that conversation look like? What does he tell them?
No, I'm not going to take you inside the room. We have a thing called executive privilege in the States. There's been a little litigation over it, as you might have noticed.
There has been. I understand that.
So the last thing I'm going to do is to yield ground on it.
I understand. So let's move on to Huawei. That's a big issue. And let's not talk about executive privilege, because you've been very outspoken about Huawei. Restricting exports to Huawei. Next move, what are they?
Well, Huawei has been out encouraging American companies to flaunt the U.S. laws, to flaunt the regulations that we have. That's a very dangerous practice, and it's not a very good practice, and longer term, not going to be good for them. We are examining always all the mechanisms of export controls, and they've heightened our sensitivity on the one that they're encouraging Americans to flaunt, and that's the de minimis rule about moving things offshore.
Secretary Ross, objectives are important. I just wonder if the objective is just to cut Huawei off from U.S. exports. Is that the ultimate objective here?
No, the ultimate objective is to protect national security interests.
How do you look at the national security interests on the one hand and phase 2 talks on the other hand? Can you reconcile the two things? Here's for me where it's been difficult following the administration. I'm told on the one hand the Huawei story is on a separate track.
It is.
And then the president will tell you otherwise.
Well, I mean, you're quoting from the president your version of things. I can tell you.
Well, I could get his words specifically. The president has said it's all part of the same story.
Huawei is an enforcement action. It was not negotiated during phase 1, and as we stand right here, there's no particular intent to negotiate it in phase 2.
So you believe, quite truly, that you could cut off Huawei and still progress with phase 2 trade talks?
Well, you're building some assumptions in. We didn't say...
No, I'm asking questions. I'm exploring that with you now.
Yeah, but we haven't cut off Huawei. What we have cut off are things that we think are particularly militarily sensitive and otherwise troublesome.
Why do you think those rules are necessary? What do you think would happen if those rules weren't in place?
Well, I don't even understand the question. We have, for years, maintained lists, entity lists.
Sure. So let me ask the question a little differently so you understand it perfectly.
That's nothing new.
If you were to cut off US exports to Huawei, why would those rules be necessary? Why is that so important from a national security standpoint? What's the ultimate worry of the administration?
That's not even what we're talking about. We have given some licenses to people to go through on Huawei. So you're creating some sort of a hypothetical question that doesn't correspond to what we're actually
I'm looking at the track and where things are heading, and ultimately that could be where things are heading, and I think a lot of people are interested in the story as it evolves as to what may or may not happen in the future. Forgive me for posing hypotheticals, but I think that's worth a conversation, isn't it?
Well, maybe it is, but we try to deal with realities rather than with hypotheticals.
Let's deal with the reality of phase 2. How difficult is this going to be?
Well, I think now that the confidence has been built, now that the mutual trust has been built, and now that we've covered some of the sensitive issues, it should be getting easier, not harder.
The United States this time is getting together with the EU and Japan, a multilateral effort through the WTO to try and get the Chinese to scale back on subsidizing key parts of their industries.
Right, well, that's a huge problem.
It's a massive issue, and I've discussed it many times on programs on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio, and I think a lot of people have sympathy with the administration. It's always a debate about approach. How do we achieve the ultimate outcome? Walk me through how this is going to work as we go through the WTO with the likes of the EU, with the likes of Japan. It's a different approach compared to what the United States has done with China over the last 2 years.
No, the reason we took unilateral action in a lot of different sectors, including the steel and aluminum, is we were getting no place in terms of meaningful cooperation from the EU. It's not our favorite course. It's the course we had to take. We're very disappointed, frankly, that the European Union has not put in very much in the way of safeguards, and as a result of the failure to take concerted action, that's why China is, believe it or not, building more steel capacity. If the EU had cooperated sooner, you and the EU and we and the world would have been saved a lot of grief.
When it comes to subsidies, is it just about steel, or is it a whole lot more broadly?
Absolutely not. It's about a lot of things.
Because Made in China 2025, some people would say China quite arrogantly came out and said, we're going to dominate these industries by this time point. They seem to have backed away from the phrase, but it's pretty clear what they want to achieve.
Well, I don't think they've changed the behavior. They've changed the language because they know it hit a raw nerve in the West.
How quickly would you like to see a change of behavior? What's doable?
Well, we're already seeing it. The very fact that China in phase acknowledged forced technology transfers had been occurring. That's the first time, I believe, there's been that public recognition. And they not only recognized that they were occurring, they agreed they were a problem and agreed to prohibit them. That's huge progress.
Two different things are going on here, though. There's some pressure being applied to the Europeans on the one hand to open things up, lower barriers to entry into the market. A lot of people, as I say, have sympathy with that effort. But at the same time, we're trying to partner up with the EU to put the pressure on the Chinese. Can we do all these things at once, Wilbur?
Well, sure, because what we're trying to do is to get China to comply with other rules.
How do you get the partners to come with you at the same time as putting pressure on them and threatening them with auto tariffs?
Well, people should be able to deal with more than one concept at the same time.
Well, let's get another concept into this conversation as we wrap things up. I know you've been a busy guy over the last couple of days. I also know you met with the interim president of Venezuela today as well.
Yes.
What did you talk about?
Well, we've been supporters of the Guaido regime, the legitimate regime, from early days. If anything, we're more determined to be continuing in our support. And again, we're disappointed that Europe is joining with us in the sanctions.
Are you surprised that others haven't come with you, Secretary Ross, at a time when the administration has started to act a whole lot more unilaterally through this administration over the last couple of years?
I'm disappointed. I would have thought Europe would be far more sensitive to human rights. Europe's approach seems to be very selectively sensitive to human rights.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea why it is. I think it's ill-conceived. How anybody could be supporting the Maduro regime, which the failure to put sanctions is supporting.
Which part of Europe would you think is supporting the Maduro regime right now?
Well, anybody who hasn't agreed to sanctions, anybody who hasn't agreed to recognize the legitimate Guaido government.
Do you think there could be a disagreement on the effectiveness of sanctions?
There may be, and if that were the nature of the discussion, it would be something that one could discuss. That's not the nature.
I want to round things out with a final question on human rights abuses in China. Big issue in Xinjiang. There are some dreadful stories being written in the Washington Post, the New York Times. We've all seen some of these reports. Is it difficult to sit around a table and strike a trade deal when you know those allegations are around?
Well, we've taken some actions, as you know, some of the sanctions that we put in some of the entity lists. So we're not ignoring those problems. But as I said earlier in the interview, we think one government should be able to have more than one idea at the same time.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, talked to each other for many, many years. It's great to see you again,
Good
Wilbur.
to see you.
Thank you very much for being on the program.
Jonathan Farrow, a tremendous interview. Thank you so much for that, interviewing Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in Davos in Switzerland on a wide range of issues. Importantly, on Huawei's connection to phase 2 trade discussions and pointedly on tariffs potentially on European exports to the United States, particularly the auto sector. Meanwhile, from Davos, we also heard Bob Prince, co-CIO of Bridgewater, saying that we are seeing the end of the boom and bust cycle, which is particularly relevant for our next guest, or our guests, I should say, plural, who have been sort of honing in on this concept of a Minsky moment. And I'm really glad to say we have John Authers with us, senior editor for Bloomberg Markets, as well as a special guest, Bob Barbera, who wrote a book on the Minsky moment that a lot of people talk about and are waiting for. It is also a professor at Johns Hopkins. So I'm wondering, John, just can you give us a sense of why you wanted to take a closer look at the concept of a Minsky moment right now?
Well, I did decide this before somebody in control of a very large amount of money declared that the boom-bust cycle was over, which would appear to be one of the classic moments that Minsky would worry about. But even a month or so ago, when we started on the Bloomberg Book Club saying, read Minsky and read Bob's book on Minsky, there was obvious concern. The key notion of Hyman Minsky that we were trying to get at is that stability breeds instability, that when people are calm and relaxed and confident, they will inevitably take things too far, and that will lead to overexpansion of credit, a Ponzi cycle, and then the Minsky moment is when the coyote looks down, to mix my metaphors, and realize that there is nothing to support that debt.
Dr. Barbera, do you believe we are at a Minsky moment currently?
Well, I like to say that the difference between me and Ray Dalio is that he had the timing precisely right, and therefore he has 50 billion and I don't. Right. So I can't tell you I know we're at a Minsky moment right now, but I can tell you that we have the preconditions falling into place, and certainly on the debt side. I mean, just think about the fact that junk bonds yielded 16% in 2009. In other words, no one was willing to lend to a risky company, and now you're seeing them at less than 5%. So there's no margin for error there. Now, if a company is offered an extremely easy credit term, they're going to borrow more, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, although you could argue people have been trying to make this bet for a long time. Since the crisis, everyone's been worried that we're sowing the seeds for the next crisis. But there's the Federal Reserve and the ECB and the BOJ sticking their thumb on the scales here. To Bob Prince's point, a lot of people are saying he's crazy. This sort of heralds the next Minsky moment. Other people saying he's right. The idea that the central banks are coming in and suppressing volatility, suppressing yields, changes the equations fundamentally.
Okay, so I think that if we were to watch what the Fed is doing, let's pick one central bank, the one we watch most of the time, what they're saying is the inflation backdrop is quiescent, and as a consequence, they'd have to see a meaningful change in inflation before they would begin to tighten credit. All right, that's been the movie. The movie has been you watch the wrong arena. So you're watching a sideshow, the price of corn and what UAW wages are doing, and you're ignoring the main event, which is what's going on in asset markets. So you're staring at the price of corn. The asset markets, because you've said I'm not going to do anything, get progressively riskier. At some point, you get a modest, unimportant rise for inflation, but you dutifully respond to it. And you let everybody know it's a small inflation, it'll be easy to take care of. What happens? You bust the bubble, and then you discover that the cost of that modest tightening is much larger than you anticipated. So in 1990, Greenspan talks about secular headwinds. In 2000, Bernanke says we need helicopter money. And you're watching the wrong movie. And it's not that they have ended the cycle. It's that they're not looking at what matters.
Hey, John, tell us about the upcoming Book Club live chat you have.
So this is part of our ongoing book club with the screamingly clever name of Author's Notes. authors with an E.
I get it.
Yeah, good. And we'll be live blogging on the terminal. So anybody who has access to a terminal who wants a multimedia Bloomberg experience this morning can keep listening to radio while following our live blog on TLIV Go on the terminal, starting at 11, carrying on till 12:30. If you have any questions for me, or particularly Bob Barbera, email them to authors with an E note Markets at Bloomberg.net.
John Authors, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. John Authors, Senior Editor, Bloomberg Markets, and Dr. Barbera from Johnson. Hopkins,
who is the author of The Cost of Capitalism, Understanding Market Mayhem and Stabilizing Our Economic Future. Have we had a stabilization or we facing another Minsky moment?
Right, exactly. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Paul, expect more arguments about abuse of power. House Democrats make their impeachment case against President Trump for a second day in the Senate. House managers also hope to convince Republicans to let them call witnesses. Former Vice President Joe Biden says he has no plans to be one of them. The reason
antibiotic-resistant bacteria. You know, it's been decades since we've had a new class of antibiotics, and there just aren't companies working on it or investing enough money, because if they actually develop one, the priority will be to make sure that nobody uses it, so that resistance doesn't develop. It's a market failure, and one that is going to have to be corrected by a mechanism other than the market. And I think that describes the response to viruses too. You have to create an infrastructure and incentives that exist independent of it being a blockbuster seller.
Max Neeson, thanks so much for joining us, giving us your thoughts on this. Max Neeson, biotech, pharma, and healthcare columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, joining us here in our Bloomberg 1130 studios in New York, giving us his thoughts on kind of this virus and how the big pharma companies think about interacting and dealing with these issues. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Well, the latest headline to cross related to the coronavirus outbreak, Paul, has to do with travel to China. The State Department has raised its advisory level for Americans to enter the country from exercise extreme caution to reconsider travel. That's level 3. Coronavirus has killed at least 17 people in China. The country's confirmed 571 infections and effectively cut off travel in and out of Wuhan, the central Chinese city of 11 million people where the virus was first detected. Hospitals are struggling to keep up.
We are now daily hearing of massive increases in the numbers. Part of that increase is coming from the processing of specimens collected earlier.
That's Scout and Galea with the World Health Organization. A second day of arguments begins in just about 2 hours in the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump. Democratic House managers will focus today on the abuse of power article against the president. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tells ABC News he hopes the American people are watching.
Some of the Republican members feel the heat. They put pressure on McConnell, and that's how some of these things were changed. The big one is witnesses and documents, and we'll see.
Variety reports about 11 million people watched yesterday on cable or TV. Vice President Mike Pence is urging world leaders to put pressure on Iran at an event marking 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz.
We must also stand strong against the leading state purveyor of anti-Semitism.
He spoke at the World Holocaust Forum in Jerusalem. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Our relationship with Asia is simple. Find the most experienced journalists.
These countries will need each other more and more in the future.
Let them gather the best data and experts.
Let's get to Singapore now and our guest.
Then bring everything they find straight to you.
Let's talk about where you are. There's quite a lot of headwinds there too.
Actually, it's not simple. It's just better. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team? Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry. Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
That pleasant breeze when you first step off the plane, the first warm welcome from a friendly local, and that first sip of something chilled by the sun-drenched shore. Your first trip to the Algarve is rarely your last. At Sunhat Villas, we've been Algarve specialists for over 19 years. Browse our portfolio of fabulous villas and find the perfect place to stay during your next Algarve escape. Search Sunhat Villas. Add to protected.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Hairy Bikers here. This message goes out to something very special.
Yes, we're talking to you, chicken.
Maybe we've been seeing too much of each other.
But times have changed, Dave.
We've been cheating on meat.
Thing is, no stocks make veggie dishes so irresistible that cheating on meat is proper tasty.
Our dear chicken, you were the fire in my life. But it's all about you now, aubergine katsu curry. Prepare to be wined and dined, my love.
Cheat on meat with no veggie stocks.
Fly with Cathay Pacific and arrive ready to make the most of the bustling markets of Hanoi. Book now at cathaypacific.com. Cathay Pacific. Move beyond.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge. Wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Oh my days, it's storming the charts at 169.
And last over the line, number 169. You're 169 in line to the throne.
The number 169 never screamed going places until now. Get the Toyota Aygo X-Play for only £169 deposit, then £169 a month with 0% APR representative. Just go. Aygo.
0% APR representative on new sales of Aygo X-Play over 48 months. £169 per month. Customer deposit of £169 when proposed and approved via Access Toyota by 31st of March 2020. £3,311.25p optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. We're seeing red on the screen for the major averages. Stocks slumping. That follows losses in Europe and Asia. Still the concern that the virus that's spreading from China is going to drag on global growth. We have a look at oil. That's sliding to its lowest level since October. There are concerns the virus will dent demand in financial shares, the biggest drag on the S&P 500. Investors still trying to gauge the potential impact of this coronavirus. The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index, that's hovering at a 2-decade high. The Past week's data point to improvement in the economic outlook as well as household finances. We have right now the Dow Jones Industrial Average 166 points lower, and that is down by 0.6%. We're at 29,022. The S&P 500 13 points lower, a decline of 0.4% at 3308. And the Nasdaq Composite Index down 16 points. That's down 0.2 at 9366. We have the benchmark 10-year yield at 171. It's down about 5 basis points. Seeing a bid to Treasuries as a haven right now, up 13.30 seconds in price. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Our next guest really has a unique view on the market. Michael Sonnenfeld, chairman and founder of Tiger 21. Tiger 21 is a peer membership organization for high net worth investors. Tiger 21 has 770 members with more than $77 billion in assets. So really a unique view on the market. Michael, thanks so much for joining us here in our Bloomberg 1130 studios. Right now, after the move we had in the market in 2019, what are your members saying about the market? Are they running out on that risk curve, or are they saying, gee, maybe I'm going to pull it in a little bit?
So I think sentiment is shifting. People who weren't concerned a year ago are a little more concerned today. People who were concerned are even more so. But our members are looking for an all-weather portfolio, and the way they do that is sort of barbell. They have risk assets in public, private equity, and real estate, and then they have large reserves of cash at about 12%, so they're not forced to liquidate if there's a market downturn, the very best assets they want to hold on to.
Ray Dalio said cash is trash. What's the argument for holding it?
So the argument for holding it is if you're an entrepreneur, our members have built great businesses and they've done it sort of step by step by rolling up their shirt sleeves. You want to have cash to pounce on an opportunity. If you're a pure investor like Ray, he has different ways of looking at a fully invested portfolio. But for our members who are individuals, they want to make sure that if there's a tremendous downturn, they can live through it. So they have 12% in cash, which is about 6 years living expenses by historic standards. Our members live on about 2% of their assets. And more importantly, they don't want to be forced to liquidate assets at just the wrong time at low prices. They want to be able to weather through any potential storm.
Michael, I know many of your members and you as well have a background in real estate. How are they looking at real estate right now?
Sure. So real estate is king. It's the number one asset within our members' portfolio, about 29%. I think they look at it as the great anchor. It's the income producing, the reoccurring income that comes from real estate that a lot of our members count on. They've taken some chips off the table. A year or two ago, it was in the mid-30s, so they've taken low-hanging fruit. And you have such transformation in real estate, particularly in the United States. You have the gateway 24/7 cities, which are very strong, but even there's some weakness there in the upper end here in New York. And then you get out of those gateway cities where technology companies are thriving and there's growth, and you have a heap of heartache out there. So it's not just one size fits all, but that's where our members' expertise is, and that's why they want to continue investing.
When we talk about private equity, you said that was one area that they have been increasing allocations to. There's been record amounts of money raised, record amounts of dry powder to put to work, valuations near or at record highs. How concerned are the members that they're perhaps getting in at a top, even though this has been an asset class that has been delivering outsized returns?
So our members are entrepreneurs who have built businesses from scratch, and so they tend to want to look at private equity as a direct shareholder in a small company that's growing. They understand that there's lots of cash, but they're playing into that trend by growing very small businesses into large. They're not putting huge amounts of money in the big mega funds. They've had their day. Our members are helping to create the businesses that are going to take advantage of that cash that you're talking about. So in order to be a seller into a seller's market, you have to create companies that are the stuff of legends. And that's why at the other end of the spectrum, they're staying away from the IPOs. Those were overpriced last year, whether people got greedy or whatever it was. Most of the IPOs traded down. So our members have shifted from looking at IPO opportunities to venture capital and private equity opportunities.
How concerned are your members about, some of the geopolitical risk, whether it's impeachment or whether it's trade issues? Do they try to take a longer-term view and not let that noise get in the way?
So for the long term, our members are risk on. They have 70+% in public equity, private equity, and real estate. So they have a long-term bet on the economy that is almost doesn't look at the short term, if you will. But because they know that unexpected things are what trash markets. You're going to come in one day and the market's going to be dramatically down. That's why they're carrying large amounts of cash. They want to have that balance. When you sell a business, you have to come together with a strategy. And when you meet every month with people who have been doing this, in particular people who lived through the 2008 crisis and said what worked, when you can learn from your peers in a confidential setting, you can get an edge and figure out where your place is in that
in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
Just real quick here, I'm wondering whether you have a sense of the appropriate returns to expect in an all-weather portfolio through the cycle.
So last year, I'd say most of our members were in the high single digits and low double digits, and many of them watched the markets up 28 or 29%. But they had much higher returns than the market over their career. Last year was an anomaly. So we'd like to be long-term greedy, not short-term greedy. We'd like to be able to weather through the storms. I think if you could get on a passive portfolio anything in the high single digits over the long term, that would be pretty great.
Michael Sonnenfeld, thank you so much for being with us. Michael Sonnenfeld, chairman and founder of Tiger 21, with members who have the
Very
assets
cool.
of $77 billion. Really, really interesting to hear how they're thinking, what it means to be cautious right now.
And the number I took away, living on 2% of their assets. So
Yeah.
Go back and
12% being in cash.
Yeah.
So much for cash is trash. I'm Lisa Abramowitz along with Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are lower with concerns rising about the virus outbreak in China. The risk is emerging just as evidence mounts that the global economy has turned a corner. American Airlines is planning to step up growth this year, extending efforts to expand at key airports. Capacity of flights and seats will rise as much as 5% this year. America's largest truck stop company is rebranding. Pilot Flying J is changing its corporate name and structure to be called Pilot Company. The move comes after Berkshire Hathaway paid $2.76 billion for an almost 39% stake in the firm in 2017. And Burger King is cutting the price of its faux meat burger as sales starts to dip following last year's introduction. The biggest Burger King franchisee in the U.S. said sales tapered off to about 28 Impossible Whoppers daily per store, down from 32 previously. The sandwich was recently added to the chain's $2 for $6 discount menu. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Are you interested in a challenging...
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
Got big plans for 2020? Cap
Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Cutting for the net. Scores! On the goal line. Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket?
Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio
anywhere you want.
To see all the stations broadcasting in your area,
Find the local radio section on the home screen.
keep it local with TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade. You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at Pacific Gas and Electric. They reached a settlement with some of their biggest creditors, but they still have to face the governor of California. Plus, we're going to talk to our good friend Greg Vallier of AGF Investments, get his thoughts on how U.S. politics are impacting global markets. But first, let's go to John Tucker of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. John.
Yeah, and Paul, the major averages, they are all lower right now. Fears over this coronavirus and the possible spread. You know, as you look at the broader market, financial shares, the biggest drag right now, the S&P 500. Mining companies, they led the stocks Europe 600 index lower after declines from Seoul to Sydney. The Shanghai Composite in China, that plunged about 2.8%. That was the biggest drop in about 8 months. We're also seeing oil sliding to its lowest level since November. Concerns the virus could dent demands. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, 188 points lower. Right now, 28,996. That's a 0.7% decline. S&P 500, 16 points lower. That's down about 0.5%. We're at 3305. And the NASDAQ, 27 points lower. That's down 0.3 at 9356. Now, on the trade front, talking to Bloomberg from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte expressed confidence Europe and President Trump can achieve a trade pact.
He has his irritations about Europe. We have some issues with the US, but that is not a problem. That's why you have to negotiate. I think we can get a deal done.
And on the data front, here back home, jobless claims remain historically low, running at 211,000 last week, consistent with the Federal Reserve's view that the labor market in the U.S. is pretty tight. 10-year yield, 171. That is down 530. Right now, down 5 basis points on the yield as the price goes up. A Haven bid, they're up 15-30 seconds. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
California's biggest utility is finally working through or getting closer to working through some of its liabilities after wildfires put it on the hook for billions of dollars, throwing it into bankruptcy from having been an investment grade rated company. Joining us now is Phil Brendel, senior credit analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Skillman, New Jersey. And I'm wondering where we are. If you could just bring us up to speed in the whole court process and the sort of resurrection of PG&E to a solvent company utility one more time.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks a lot. Yeah, no. So Pacific Gas and Electric announced through an 8K that they've reached a deal with note holders, and that's about $22 billion of notes. And what they're going to get back is some bonds will be reinstated, some will get a mix of longer dated notes and shorter dated notes. But the bottom line is this is a tremendously successful, progress for the company. First they cut a deal with the tort claimants, the insurers, the shareholders are getting something here. So, we're seeing all the pieces come together for a deal.
So, Phil, we understand, however, that Governor Gavin Newsom of California is not supportive of the deal. What's the status of that and what needs to happen?
Right. So for a while there, it was the company and the shareholders on one side. You had the governor on another side, and then you had a three-way standoff with the note holders. One of our thesis was that if two of those parties get together, the third's in trouble. And I think that's what we're seeing now. By and large, the governor's moment to impact the plan in bankruptcy court has passed. They arguably could have been more forceful when the tort claimants and subrogation claimants, they had a restructuring support agreement that was up for court approval, but they chose to be fairly silent. So it might be a little bit late in the game to impact things in the bankruptcy court, but there is the trump card that they hold is the CPUC needs to approve this plan, and so they'll have an impact there, obviously. That's the Public Utility Commission.
Can we just take a step back for a second? I remember when the wildfires first were in the news and when PG&E ended up filing for bankruptcy in short order because of these liabilities, there was a larger discussion about what California should do with its utilities, who should be on the hook for this, whether or not this was mismanagement or just an increasing issue that was going to occur. And I'm wondering, has there been any broader conversation on that front?
Right. So, and it's all about who made money here, who lost money. And I think the winners and losers, I think the shareholders obviously were big losers, but at the end of the day, they're probably going to walk away with 20 to 35% of the reorganized company on behalf of their old stock. They are also going to be on the hook to put in $12 billion more here. So there definitely has been, I think most of their pain was taken up front, and that $12 billion equity investment. So I think that's where the bulk of the losses were suffered. As far as the bondholders are coming away pretty nicely here. They're getting a full recovery, and on top of that, the terms of that debt look to be pretty attractive given where the market is right now. So to some extent, the helpful credit markets right now are providing providing value to some of the stakeholders here that otherwise wouldn't be there in a different market. So at this point now, with the holders signing up and saying, yeah, we'll take these notes back at 4.95% for 30 years, they're effectively taking the market risk from this point forward. And so, if the markets did go against them, the state wouldn't, and the state and PG&E have that deal already nailed down.
Phil Brendel, thank you so much for being with us. Phil Brendel, Senior Credit Analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Skillman, New Jersey. Bigger issue, especially for people like yourself with homes in California. Eagerly waiting to figure out what the longer-term ramifications will be.
Because these fires aren't going away. So it's how do you, year after year, season after season, deal with it? Yeah, who should bear the liability of it? Meanwhile, we are seeing a slight risk-off feel in markets, although I really do want to go back to something that Dave Wilson was saying earlier, which is it does seem to be an excuse to take some chips off the table more than anything related to the U.S. potentially getting concerned about contagion from China, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a pretty minor sell-off nonetheless. In the bond market, you are seeing a rally. And I'm really still struck by what Michael Sonnenfeld said about ultra-wealthy individuals and how they're stockpiling 12% of their assets in cash to try to make sure that they have an all-weather strategy. Yeah, I wonder how they were positioned before December of last year, 2018, when we had that nearly 20% sell-off in the equity markets.
But what he was saying was, off air, he was saying, Ray Dalio may say one thing, but let's say inflation does pick up and the cash is worth less. He'd rather have the money to go reinvest in other assets that sell off even more in that scenario. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with world and national headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, the State Department has raised its travel advisory for Americans to go to China to level 3. Reconsider. With ongoing uncertainty over coronavirus, it's killed at least 17 people, and China has confirmed 571 infections. Singapore reported its first case today. At least one patient is in quarantine near Seattle. The White House says Americans are safe from coronavirus. House Democrats are preparing for a second day of arguments in President Trump's impeachment trial this afternoon. The managers will focus today on the abuse of power article. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says the managers have set a high bar.
It may have been the first time that many of my Republican colleagues heard the full story, the complete narrative from start to finish, uninterrupted and not filtered through the kaleidoscope lens of Fox News, where at best things are left out and at worst things are terribly distorted.
White House counsel argues the president's side starting on Saturday. There is a new Democratic leader in New Hampshire with less than 3 weeks till the state's primary election. The latest poll from Boston Public Radio shows Bernie Sanders surged from 4th to 1st place in the granite state since last month, now at 29%, followed by Pete Buttigieg at 17%, Joe Biden at 14%, and Elizabeth Warren at 13%. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says she's worried about a growing conflict between young campaigners for a cleaner planet and those who reject global warming. She spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his Ph.D. at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
In-depth.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
10 years ago, the book The New Jim Crow helped ignite a movement against mass incarceration. This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with the author, Michelle Alexander.
Millions of people have been relegated to a permanent second-class status. It wasn't a message people were eager to hear, but I think it is today easier to see.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home! And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom for this Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks in the U.S. are falling as investors worry that the deadly virus outbreak in China could continue spreading and hurt the global economy. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is 178 points lower. That's down 0.6%. We're at 29,008. The Nasdaq Composite Index 19 points lower. That's down 0.2% at 93.64. S&P 500 14 points lower. That's down 0.4% at 33.07. Just 3 of the 11 industry groups in the S&P 500 are higher right now. They include real estate stocks, industrials, as well as utilities. Again, financials, healthcare, and energy, the worst performers in the broader index. Some economic news today. Index of leading economic indicators dropping in December for the 4th month in 5, hinting at some moderation. The data are intended to project the economy's growth prospects. We have money pouring into treasuries right now. Rally for the 10-year, the benchmark up 13.30 seconds in price. That has pushed the yield down to 1.71%. That's down 5 basis points. And we have NYMEX crude down $1.18, 2% lower right now at $55.55 a barrel. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the 2020 presidential election is heating up. Primaries coming up in Iowa and in New Hampshire just a couple of weeks away. To get a sense of what that means for the markets, we welcome our good friend Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist for AGF Investments, based in Washington, D.C., but currently in Florida. Lucky him. Greg, thanks so much for joining us on the phone here. Give us a status update, if you will, of kind of how the Democratic field is shaping up.
Well, I'd say, Paul, it was an interesting development, and that is new polls showing that Bernie Sanders, of all people, is making a little surge. I thought the dust-up he had with Elizabeth Warren might have hurt both of them, but maybe it just hurt her.
Greg, it seems like the common idea at this point is that President Trump is getting increasingly likely to win re-election based on the economy and based on the fact that the impeachment and the other issues haven't really stuck to him. Do you think that that's an appropriate outlook?
I think a really important takeaway, Lisa, is that there's only 3 candidates that I can see who could win in November. One would be Trump, who's the early favorite. Another would be Biden. And the other would be, of course, Michael Bloomberg.
Full disclosure, Michael Bloomberg is the founder and the majority owner of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg News. Carry on.
Yeah, so if those are the only 3 candidates who I think have a realistic chance of winning, I think that the markets could live with all 3. And I think that's a big deal for the markets that right now I think are expecting a victory from Trump.
So, Greg, as we take a look at the current Democratic field, arguably, when you look at Sanders and Warren, very far to the left, do you expect whoever the candidate is come November from the Democratic Party to move more to the center to try to beat Trump?
I think they're going to have to, yes. I think that, a far-left agenda is not going to do it. And I think that most Democrats I talk to have an issue with Bernie. They have an issue with Elizabeth Warren. They don't think that she could win. I mean, appealing to the markets is not the end of the world. I mean, there are other factors. One would be who could manage the economy. And I think that the markets and the economy could live just fine with Joe Biden and just fine with Michael Bloomberg.
I'm trying to understand what a second term for President Trump would look like economically. Are markets at all starting to think ahead to that? In other words, Joe Biden might hold the course. Michael Bloomberg will do what he does. But I'm wondering, with President Trump, he has talked about an infrastructure spending plan or perhaps more fiscal spending. Is that what the market is kind of pricing in and expecting?
Yeah, well, you hit on the key word, Lisa. That's spending. I think in Washington, both parties are oblivious to the budget deficit. They'll spend aggressively, infrastructure, a lot more on defense. But there's a new issue. It's going to be really interesting over the next couple of weeks to hear the debate on Social Security. Trump raised it in Davos. Bernie raised it against Biden. And I think the future of Social Security, which is an explosive issue, a hot stove that most politicians don't want to touch. I think this is going to be a big one over the next few weeks.
What do you think is the President Trump's biggest, weak spot here as we make our way towards November of this year?
Well, he's got 2 or 3. He's very inconsistent, and we all know he's very volatile. I'll give you sort of a wild card. I think there's one issue that he ignores at his own peril, and that's climate change. I think young people in particular are angry and want to see something done. Trump dismisses this issue, and I think that could backfire on him.
One question with Joe Biden has been, does he have the support and the energized base enough to get voters out for him? And I guess especially he is still leading in national polls. Do you think that he has that basically people will be enthusiastic enough to actually turn out?
Well, the jury's still out on that. I think that it's possible that people might see someone who's not very inspirational. And just to come full circle from what we began with in our conversation this morning, I think there's only 2 candidates who really inspire passion. One, of course, is Trump with his base, and the other is Bernie. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Bernie is still doing well as we enter, the Iowa and New Hampshire races.
Well, it's interesting. When you think back to 2016, we had a far right in Trump win the election after a centrist Democrat and President Obama. Could we go the other way this time, and maybe the market, maybe the electorate says, let's go really hard left, whether it's a Warren or Sanders?
It could be, but one of Trump's skills is that he can demonize an opponent very ruthlessly. And I think he would certainly demonize any Democrat who went far left as a radical Venezuelan socialist. So I think that would make it difficult. One other point I'd make, I think maybe the country would like somebody boring, likable, a little less bombastic. And anti-Trump does have some appeal, and that's a role that I think Biden could play.
Wow, ringing endorsement. Maybe people want someone boring. Joe Biden, you're the person. Greg Valliere, thank you for your insights. Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. To be clear, that's not my view. I'm just saying that was basically the implication there. Definitely, I think it's salient, though, what Greg said, which is any of the candidates that could win wouldn't necessarily disrupt markets all that much. And that's actually a pretty bold concept, considering the fact that a lot of people are expecting more volatility heading into getting closer to the election cycle.
Yes, particularly to the extent that Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, continues to poll well, continues to do well in the primaries. I think the markets look at as a candidate and then as a potential president from either one of those two as not supportive of financial markets. So there is a risk that arguably is not priced into the market at the moment.
It's interesting to me whenever people talk about the election, they talk about the healthcare sector and how those stocks tend to be really volatile ahead of time, based on either nationalized healthcare or ending certain subsidies. And I find it compelling, this argument. Maybe healthcare stocks are cheap because they've been overly discounted ahead of potential turmoil that might not actually transpire. I don't know. Some of these are kinds of trades.
Yeah, it's tough to get long healthcare when there still is a viable chance of an Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders taking office.
If you have a Republican Senate, there's not much that she could probably pass through. So that's like another argument that people have been having going in. Coming up, Bloomberg Balance of Power with David Weston talking about impeachment. And I'm sure they will go deeper into all things election. Here in markets, we're seeing a little bit of red, but off earlier lows. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with my co-host and colleague Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre. So expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day,
You can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power. This is where the world of politics meets the world of business. On the brief today from Capitol Hill, Emily Wilkins on day 2 of the House case against President Trump. Tom Orlick from Washington on the effect of the Wuhan virus on the Chinese economy, and Paul Gordon from Frankfurt on the ECB's first review of policies since 2003. So, Emily, we're back together again. To set the stage for us, we have the second day of argument coming up in less than an hour now.
Yes, in just under an hour, Adam Schiff, as well as the 6 other impeachment managers, will be back on the Senate floor. We're expecting another long day. Yesterday, we really saw them lay out the chronology of what has happened, of the different steps that have led up to this moment. Today, we expect them to be making the argument why what President Trump did is an impeachable offense. Remember, we are looking at 2 articles of impeachment here. One is abuse of power. The other is obstruction of Congress. Today, we expect the managers to really focus on the abuse of power and making their case about why that should no longer qualify President Trump to hold office.
And one of the things that struck a lot of observers was the detail into which the Democrats, the House managers, are willing to go here. They've got these binders that they're going through. They introduced a lot of evidence. Does it look like they're going to take the whole 24 hours over 3 days?
They are on track to do so at this point. They spent, I think, their full 8 hours, maybe even a little bit more yesterday. They really need to lay out this case, and I think they think that more time is on their side. I don't think they feel a need to rush at this point.
Okay, Emily, thank you so much for your continued great reporting from Capitol Hill. Now let's go to a very different story in a different part of the world. We're going to China and Wuhan, that city of 11 million people on lockdown. Tom Orlick is in Washington. He can tell us specifically, what does this potentially mean for the Chinese economy, Tom?
So I think the lens through which people are going to view this, David, is the lens of SARS. That 2003 outbreak, which really crunched down China's GDP in the second quarter of that year, taking it down from 11.1% to 9.1% before there was a little bit of a recovery as the outbreak abated. The argument which we're making is that changes in the structure of China's economy since the SARS outbreak actually increase the risks. If we look at the part of the economy which is most impacted by outbreaks, the part which was most impacted by SARS, well, it's the services sector. People stopped going to restaurants, they stopped going to the shops, they stopped going to the cinema. And if we think about the transition in China's economy in the period since 2003, one of the main stories is the rise of the services sector. It's just much more important now than it was then. It's still very early days on this. We'll see how the disease develops, but potentially we could be looking at a more serious risk.
So the shift to services indicates increased risk. On the other hand, did the Chinese government learn something through SARS? Are they reacting in a different way this time that might limit the damage?
That's the hope, David. Back in 2003, China's government got a lot of criticism domestically and internationally. They weren't transparent enough. They weren't cooperative enough with international agencies who were trying to help out. Lessons have been learned from that. The hope is that a faster reaction, greater transparency with the public, more willingness to cooperate with international organizations like the World Health Organization is going to help contain this outbreak, and it's going to dominate the news and market attention for a few days, but perhaps not have that sharp impact on the GDP.
Okay, Tom, one more. What about the timing here, just on the eve of the Lunar New Year?
Right, so that's a critical point, David. The timing for China really couldn't be any worse. The Chinese Lunar New Year holiday is like Thanksgiving and Christmas rolled together. And remember that China is really a migrant society. Hundreds of millions of people are working a long way from their hometown, a long way from their family. Chinese New Year is the time they all go home. So there's two risks there. The first risk is so many people moving around. That raises the risk that the disease spreads more quickly around the country. Conversely, if we have a big blow to activity, if people don't get on the train, then we get that blow to GDP, even perhaps if the outbreak doesn't get worse.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you so much, Tom. It's Tom Orlik. He's chief economist with Bloomberg Economics, reporting from Washington. Now we go over to Frankfurt and Paul Gordon, because we've just heard from Madame Lagarde, and she basically says, let's take a little bit of a study now on what we're doing here, Tom and Paul.
Yes, that's right. I mean, this is a long-anticipated strategic review, the first since 2003 by the ECB. People were really hoping for some details on exactly what the ECB would study, and they didn't really get that. A very broad brush from Madame Lagarde on what's going to be studied, the inflation goal and policy instruments on the one hand, and other considerations such as financial stability and climate change, potentially controversial on that, on the other. We understand that was deliberate. People have told us that the policymakers inside the Governing Council did not want to get into specifics for fear of steering the conversation towards potential outcomes. They want a broad, open-minded review, thorough analysis of the phrase they're using before they start getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Well, I have no doubt that this is a worthwhile thing. It's timely. It should be done. At the same time, is there a little bit perhaps of politics involved here? Because it does allow Madame Lagarde, I think, a little time now to take over her job, figure out monetary policy. She doesn't have to make any decisions. She can say, we're studying it. Wait till the end of the year.
Well, she made absolutely clear that the policy decisions which are taken this year and the review will be kept separate. So they won't not take a policy decision just because the review is underway. But you are right, she's got time. Her predecessor, Mario Draghi, locked in interest rates at record lows and quantitative easing, probably for at least the next year and a half. So she doesn't have to deal with that. And the economy has improved just a little bit. At least the manufacturing slowdown has stabilized. Trade tensions have eased. They could flare up at any time, of course. The president did say in Davos that there's the possibility of tariffs on autos. He raised that prospect once again. But for now, things look not great, but at least stable.
Okay, Paul, thank you so much for reporting from Frankfurt. That's Paul Gordon, our colleague over in Frankfurt. And now it's time to get that market check on how markets are reacting to today's top stories. Joining us now is Abigail Doolittle. And I'm going to guess maybe someone has to do with travel and maybe coronavirus.
That is absolutely the case, David. And as it relates to the markets, the thing that we really want to separate is this a headline scare, or, as we often talk, will it actually affect the corporate profit outlook? So your conversation with Tom Orlik, what is the impact on the Chinese economy? It seems likely that there is going to be some sort of an impact there? What is the degree? The question here for U.S. stock investors is, could there be an impact on the U.S. economy? Now, we do have a bit of a risk-off tone, small losses for the major averages. On the week, the S&P 500 actually down about 0.6%, headed to its worst week since September, but that comes amidst this huge rally up. So the bigger question, is this a pause, or is this the start of something more corrective, especially during the all-important earnings season?
And what about transport, and particularly about airlines? Are airlines getting hit?
So airlines today, funny enough, are actually flat to up, but that has to do with JetBlue reporting their quarter. But on the week, to your point, airlines down in a big way. The Dow Transport's down more than 2%, headed to the worst week since October. And all this, of course, has to do with as travel is clamped down, there will be fewer airline travelers out there. But plus, people who were planning on traveling, say, here in the U.S. or to Europe, they may not want to get on planes. They may not want to get on trains or cruise ships just to prevent the risk of perhaps being around this virus, even though it seems pretty well contained to certain areas in China right now.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Abigail. A really great report. That's Abigail Doolittle. And now we're going to turn to Mark Crumpton. He's here with Bloomberg First Word News.
David, House impeachment managers will make their case against President Trump for a second day. Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff described the president as untruthful and vindictive, and he said Mr. Trump was out for himself, even at the expense of national security. Democrats will wrap up their case tomorrow. President Trump's lawyers will then get their turn. A word of caution from the State Department. Officials are urging Americans to reconsider any travel plans to China, as Abigail was just telling us, in response to a deadly new virus. China has ramped up efforts to contain the respiratory illness, moving to lock down 3 cities, which are home to more than 18 million people. At least 17 people in China have died. Nearly 600 have been sickened. 1 case has been reported here in the United States. Britain's delayed and disputed Brexit bill has officially been signed into law by Queen Elizabeth II. The European Union's Parliament also must approve the Brexit divorce deal before January 31st, if Britain is to leave the EU on time. Lawmakers in Brussels are due to vote on it next week. It's been more than 3.5 years since voters narrowly opted for Brexit in a June 2016 referendum. Israel's president is calling anti-Semitism and racism, quote, a malignant disease, and says no democracy is immune. Reuven Rivlin spoke at the World Holocaust Forum in Jerusalem today. Russian President Vladimir Putin, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Vice President Pence were among the more than 40 world leaders attending the forum, which coincides with the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. As Mark just told us about, then we have been watching the House managers present their case in the Senate for impeachment of President Trump. We talked with one of the managers who did that job when it was President Clinton in the dock. He's Bill McCollum. He's former Republican congressman from Florida. He'll be joining us next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Revisions, return policies.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with B.
Bike.
Nope. Banana tree.
Oh, of course. We must have missed it.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Drive carbon neutral by filling up and using Shell Go Plus today. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn.
First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Witch Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. So you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder, so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Ladies and gentlemen, behold the world's most fantastical, sensational number. 23 million. This Friday's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £23 million.
Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. Would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
All the arguments a day or so ago, and then yesterday, it looks like they're going to take up all their time, which we did not do. And I don't see who's watching this in great detail except for very partisan people who already have made up their minds. So I think that if I had any advice to them, I'd say cut this down, get it more pithy, Just present your case, and let's see where the cards fall.
Why does it seem so much weaker to you at this point? Because certainly, without a question, President Clinton did not tell the truth. And in fact, as I recall, he was disbarred ultimately, lost his bar participation. But it was basically lying under oath about a sexual relationship. The allegation is the president was actually trying to enlist the help of a foreign power to effect an outcome in an election here. Isn't that closer to what the framers thought was impeachable?
Well, first of all, there is no crime here, and we had real crimes, and they were significant to our judicial system. A lot of the public didn't understand that, and they thought, all about sex was a great defense from the standpoint of the president's people. But here, in this case, the allegation is that the Ukrainian government was solicited to interfere with the U.S. elections. That's actually an exaggeration, because if worst case scenario, the president was asking them to look into Burisma and the Biden's role in a very corrupt organization in Ukraine and into the 2016 election Ukrainian involvement, which I think you're going to hear more about from the defense in this case. And it's weak because also they're saying that this was a threat to our foreign policy and a threat to national security, because there was a delay in the time of the award of these monies and the armaments that were going over there. And in fact, that was not true. They got the armaments just as early as they were going to get them anyway. Nobody lost anything in that. And secondly, these sorts of things happen a lot with presidents. Maybe not everything the president's done. This one's obviously very exaggerates things and sometimes says things that aren't true and does a lot of over-the-top stuff. But the reality is, here in this particular case, the two articles for impeachment just don't rise, in my sense, to the level you want to remove somebody from office. You could be removing a lot of presidents from office. You could be having impeachment with every president if you had this sort of level of quality to get to, and that's the bar was that low. So I just don't see it, but that's my view, and it may not be shared. Obviously, it isn't shared by many Democrats and maybe some others.
So one of the questions that's arisen is, do you really need a crime alleged? I mean, it says crimes, but it says high crimes, which meant something particular when the Constitution was drafted, and misdemeanors, which again meant something specific, which was basically, as I understand it, abuse by the crown of its position against the people and the parliament. Do you really need to allege a crime? Is there nothing that could be impeachable that is not a crime under the federal code of Code 18, Title 18?
I think you could impeach somebody for something other than a crime. It has to be a pretty serious thing, more serious than what we've got here. This is just not that serious. I know they're making out like it is, and they've got a lot of speeches. You say it often enough, maybe, and repeat it, people are going to believe it. But the reality is that most people believe that I talk to in the legal circles, that you can have a high crime and misdemeanor that's not technically a violation of the U.S. Criminal laws. But there are those who are arguing, I think maybe Professor Dershowitz is one of those, who thinks you've got to have the crime and then you have the abuse of power as well. His argument, if you recall, under the Clinton impeachment trial, was the president may have committed these crimes, but they weren't connected to his office and his official duties. But what if he shot his wife and murdered her? I mean, would you leave that person in as president and can impeach them? And you suggested there may be, and I believe there could be, something the president would do that would be far more excessive than anything here in some way that would truly harm America. And you would have to consider that the door would be open to consider removal for that. But this just is nowhere near that.
Okay, really appreciate you being with us, Congressman. That's Bill McCollum. He's a partner with Denton's, and he's former Republican congressman from Florida and a former manager in President Clinton's 1999 impeachment trial. Still ahead, coronavirus is spreading and hitting China hard, with 11 million people in lockdown on the eve of the Lunar New Year. We take a look at what it means for China and for markets. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Full breakfast, cup of coffee, whatever you have in the morning, have it at daybreak.
Event risk is taking center stage for traders.
Nathan Hager.
We get a policy decision from the Federal Reserve.
And Karen Moscow.
It is the fifth major industry player to make some sort of zero commission offer.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Bloomberg has more from Hong Kong.
Weekdays at 5 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Singapore is reporting its first case of coronavirus, and the United States is urging travelers to exercise increased caution when visiting China. Meanwhile, China has restricted travel to and from Wuhan, a city of some 11 million people in central China, on the eve of the Lunar New Year, when traditionally millions of Chinese travel to their ancestral homes. For more, welcome now our colleague, anchor of Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, Sherry An, and former anchor of this program. Great to have you back. We've missed you.
Great to be here,
okay.
But a really tragic this news, right?
It is, and I guess the first question I have is, you know the situation. Is it feasible to restrict Wuhan? Is this going to work?
You said it, 11 million people, right? We have how many people in New York City trying to quarantine that number of people. Already they've said when they announced the declaration of that lockdown, that was in the wee hours of Thursday morning, and then that didn't take place until 10 a.m. So a lot of people rushed for the exits. Now on social media in China, people saying that was too late because thousands of students and migrant workers have already left. This is a city where they have a high number of students in their universities, not to mention in their migrant workers in their steel and auto manufacturing industries.
And do we know how like SARS this is? Is this similar to SARS? Because people immediately start to say, is it like SARS?
It's like coronavirus. It's the same family.
Right.
Back in 2003, this really devastated the Chinese economy. But at this moment, they're saying is one part of that family, but perhaps the relief here could be that the mortality rate so far has been low. SARS was around 8,000 people infected. Almost 800 people died from it. Right now, we know there have been 571 confirmed cases within China. We found a new case in Singapore, but perhaps one of the most striking differences with back then is that you can see the Chinese economy, how much it's grown, and its global weight, really a very different situation from what it was back in 2002.
Sherry, could this have happened anywhere, or is there something about Wuhan that particularly makes it vulnerable?
Wuhan, it's really interesting that the main railway system is just half a mile away from the seafood market, the wet market where it all originated from. Now, this transfer of these viruses from animals to people, the farming practices in China haven't really kept up with the times, especially with the mobility of the Chinese. So there's a lot of mingling between crops and other animals, backyard farming. This seafood market, in some of their stalls, in their menus, had wolf cubs, bats, snakes. So a lot of this, people pointing to the food safety standards in China as well.
Sherry An, thank you so much for being here. Really treat to have you. That's Sherry An. She's the anchor of Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. And it's time now for the stock of the hour, and we're going to stick with China. Yum China is sinking nearly 6% today amid concerns about the spreading coronavirus. Kaylee Lines is here to explain it.
Yeah, well, this, of course, is the operator of Taco Bell's, Pizza Hut's, and the like in China. It literally gets all of its revenues in the country. And when you think about the actions China is taking, locking down Wuhan, restricting transport, and people just not wanting to go out in public, that could be a huge drag on the consumer sector, on fast food, not just fast food, retail and the like. And you're seeing not just Yum China affected in this today, but retail stocks have been hit in China, travel stocks, anything related to air or lodging, and then also notably Macau casinos, because there have been reported cases in Macau, and the chief executive of Macau said today he will not rule out closing every casino in the gambling enclave. And of course, that comes at a really critical period for those gamblers because it's the Lunar New Year. Usually that brings a surge of gambling revenue, which frankly Macau really needs because it just came off its worst year since 2016 because of the effects of Hong Kong, the U.S.-China trade war, and the like. So it comes at a really critical point
and
for them.
And Macau makes you think these are Chinese stocks, but you have, for example, Wynn. There's a lot of exposure to Macau. So this could bleed over into some U.S. companies as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Wynn, Las Vegas Sands each get about 60% of their revenue from Macau. I mean, those operations much more critical to them than the U.S. ones. And we've seen American Airlines kind of roiled by this as well, like American Air, United, all of those airlines that do have global links to them have been affected. So this is having broad ripple effects across the market today, and you're seeing that reflected in the broader equity sell-off we're seeing today as well.
Fascinating. Thank you so much to Katie Lyons for that report. Up next, one of the largest shipping companies in the country, Union Pacific, is out with its fourth quarter earnings. We're going to talk with CEO Lance Fritz and why they missed their numbers, but in fact their stock is up. And it's because he has a pretty rosy outlook going forward, in part because of the relief of the China trade tensions. That's all coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are falling on fears the coronavirus out of China is spreading and could hurt the global economy. The Dow is down 145 points, S&P falling 9, the Nasdaq dropping 11 points. Well, more people than ever are flying and airfares are up, which is why American Airlines reported a 27% jump in profits last quarter. But Procter & Gamble, the maker of Pampers and Luvs diapers, reported weak sales in its baby care business in the fourth quarter. Good news if you're a homeowner and considering a move. With home prices at record highs, the average home seller last year walked away with more than $65,000 in profit, according to real estate data firm Adam. That's a 34% return on investment on average compared to the original purchase price. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Adopt U.S. Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folk.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, it's day 2 of the Democrats' attempt to convince the Senate to remove President Trump from office. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff led off the prosecution of the president. He said Mr. Trump has shown no willingness to be constrained by the rule of law. The Democrats get 24 hours over 3 days to make their case. The president's lawyers will begin their arguments on Saturday. The The United States, the European Union, and what will soon be post-Brexit Britain have all raised the prospect of concluding trade deals between them by the end of this year. The U.S. and the EU have begun talks as President Trump turns his focus away from China following successful trade talks with Beijing. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is heading to London this weekend to meet with his counterpart Sajid Javid to discuss an array of issues, including trade. Turkey is trying to ease NATO's concerns about its purchase of a Russian-made missile defense system. Turkey's foreign minister is reiterating his proposal to create a NATO-led committee to review possible threats to the alliance posed by the purchase. The United States and other NATO members say the Russian system threatens the alliance and the U.S.-led F-35 stealth jet program. The head of New York City's subways is quitting after 2 years on the job. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority says Andy Byford has resigned. Byford had been credited with improving on-time subway service and persuading state and city lawmakers to pour billions into a system plagued by service interruptions and equipment breakdowns. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, let's stick with trains, but not the New York subway kind, a different kind. Union Pacific reported its fourth quarter earnings earlier today, missing estimates, but the stock is up on a positive outlook for the future. Here for that outlook is Union Pacific CEO Lance Fritz. He's coming just today from Omaha, Nebraska. So welcome, Mr. Fritz. Great to have you with us. Give us a synopsis of where you think your company is and how these earnings reflect that.
Yeah, David, thank you. So as we exit 2019, what we demonstrated was a substantially better service product and excellent productivity, all driven by the women and men of Union Pacific as we implemented Unified Plan 2020. When we look into 2020, we think some headwinds that we had in 2019 are turning into tailwinds, specifically around trade and more specifically around the U.S.-China Phase 1 deal. However, there's still some uncertainty that has to be cleared up. Our main competitor in trucks is still pretty loose in terms of overall capacity. And with natural gas prices so low, there's a significant headwind on coal, although that turns into a real positive as a feedstock into the petrochemical and plastics manufacturing industries.
Well, I'm glad you went there, because before we talk about your efficiency, which I do want to talk about, let's talk about what you're hauling, how much of it you're hauling. How much is coal trailing off? How much is that taking out of your business? And can you make up for it with other products like the petrochemicals?
Yeah, so coal in the fourth quarter and last year, fourth quarter was down double digits, 20 some odd percent. As we look into this year, there's still headwinds against coal. I anticipate at some point it smooths out. In the very long term, there are secular headwinds against coal, and it'll probably continue to decline. But to your point, David, there's opportunities for us to offset that. Plastics manufacturing is an opportunity. The general petrochem industry is the wonderful industry that's blossomed out of the Permian Basin and other shale plays, has both inbound and outbound product opportunity for us. And there's this gigantic opportunity on taking trucks off the highway through our more reliable, consistent, safe service product. And I see a lot of opportunity there for years to come.
Just a moment on the Phase 1 deal with China. What about agricultural products? Because there are some big numbers attached to that deal. And also, by the way, a lot of machinery.
Yeah, there are big numbers attached to that deal. The details talk about $200 billion in purchases over and above the running rate that was set in 2017. So even if a fraction of that comes true, it's growth, which is very attractive. What'll be important is to see China follow through on their commitments, and if they don't, see how the U.S. uses the effective enforcement mechanism that's built into the agreement.
So talk about the efficiency of your company. I see that the train speeds are up and the dwell times down. How are you doing that, and how far can you take it?
Yeah, David, it's almost across the board. Our train size is up. Our fuel efficiency was 2% better last year. We're doing less work that we don't need to do. We have a better car trip plan compliance. Cars are moving more per day in terms of distance. The service product is better. And how we've achieved that, David, is we've fundamentally redesigned the network. That's reduced work, but in redesigning the network, we've made it more consistent and reliable and simpler. And so the service product our customers are getting is much better, and we've taken work out of the network, which means we've reduced jobs. As we look into 2020, there's plenty more opportunity to continue to enhance the service product. We think we can get freight car velocity up some more. We think we can get train size up some more. We think there's continued opportunity to take work out of the network that doesn't need to be there. And all of that continues to reinforce a consistent, reliable, and efficient service product.
You mentioned jobs specifically. How many employees does Union Pacific have now, and how many of those could be replaced by technology, if I can put it that way?
That's a great question. So right now, think about our employment as something like 36,000 people plus or minus. I won't get the number exactly right, but it's in that ballpark. Of that, technology really impacts a couple of distinct areas. In the cab of the locomotive, we have an engineer who's manipulating the throttle and the brakes and essentially running the train, and we've got a conductor who's supporting that engineer. Technology, both what's available today and what incremental investments off of that platform, will largely make that conductor's job in the cab become less and less important, and their work really will be on the ground supporting trains. So I see that happening. We're also using technology when it comes to maintaining the railroad, both finding defects and then fixing those defects. And we're doing the same when it comes to maintaining freight cars, locomotives, and even in our switching, where we're using technology to become much more efficient at how many cars a particular job can switch.
One last question, and that's pricing power. You mentioned earlier about maybe some excess capacity in the freight hauling from trucks. How much excess capacity is there? At what point, how much growth do you have to have before you really get more pricing power?
Well, we use pricing as one of the three legs of our three-legged stool to improve our margins. And we always, first and foremost, look to price our service to the value it's delivering and make sure that we can continue to reinvest in our railroad given the returns it generates. In the environment we were in 2019, of course, pricing was difficult and under pressure in some of our markets. Now, the good news is by fundamentally transforming the railroad, we've shifted our cost basis, and markets that didn't used to look terribly attractive to us look attractive to us now. Pieces of business are starting to look attractive to us. So our new cost basis opens up more markets to compete in, and as trucks start tightening up a little bit and some of these other markets start healing, I think there's remains a really good opportunity for us to continue to price to the value that we represent.
Okay, Mr. Fritz, thank you so much for being with us. That's Lance Fritz. He's Union Pacific CEO coming to us from Omaha, Nebraska. Coming up, the CEO of Philip Morris International joins us from Davos, Switzerland. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
If you promise to cover the latest financial lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, this is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. This on a day when the major indices are all lower, more concerns about the coronavirus that is spreading. Banks and other financial companies leading losses, and the yield on the 10-year Treasury falling to 171 right now. That is a haven bid. Of course, the financials rely on higher bond yields to set lucrative interest rates. On the trade front, talking to Bloomberg from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte expressed confidence Europe and President Trump can achieve a trade pact.
He has his irritations about Europe. We have some issues with the US, but that is not a problem. That's why you have to negotiate. I think we can get a deal done.
Crude oil prices slumping, weighing on energy stocks today. Dow Jones Industrial Average 141 points lower. The S&P 500 down 10. The Nasdaq 13 points lower. And that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm John Tucker.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Philip Morris has staked its future on alternatives to traditional cigarettes and has just released a white paper report entitled Unsmoke Your Mind. Joining us from the World Economic Forum in Davos is Andre Kalansopoulos. He is the CEO of Philip Morris. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Kalansopoulos. Take us through this study. What did you find out from this study? What did you learn?
Well, the key findings from the study is that smokers around the world are very interested in having access to alternatives that are better for them than smoking cigarettes. Definitely the ones that would otherwise continue to smoke. And they expect their governments to take action so that these products are made available to them under the right regulatory conditions, obviously. And our mission as a company is to replace cigarettes and combustion, because that's the fact that we burn tobacco is the problem in cigarettes that causes disease and premature death, is to replace them by smoke-free products. Products that don't burn, so you reduce the toxicity and eventually morbidity and mortality, we hope, over the long term. Now, the Unsmoke Your Mind means that we should stop having prejudices, we should use fact and science, and that solutions that benefit the people who smoke should be prevailing on ideology or pre-established beliefs. So, on one side we say unsmoke your world around you, addressing the people who smoke and the people that care about them. And unsmoking your mind is addressing the part still of people in public health that oppose these alternatives as a second pillar to the classical tobacco control policy that is increasing restrictions and taxation on cigarette marketing, labeling, and so on. Right. So we have developed the portfolio of products that reduce toxicity because they don't burn, but we cannot achieve a change on our own. At the end of the day, we need people in public health to reach consensus that this is a right thing to do, and that's something we accept in any other product category, I would say. We're here in Davos, we talk about climate change, and we accept that alternative energies, although not zero impact on the environment, are better than fossil fuels or coal. So the same logic should apply to alternatives to cigarettes, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Right. Mr. Collins, give us a sense of where the science is right now, because there is sort of a law of unintended consequences. And, for example, with vaping back here in the United States, it turns out that at least some of these products have gotten some people sick and even killed a few people. Is the science where we need it to be to really know what the effects are of some of the alternatives to traditional cigarettes?
Well, the science for evaluating these products is not dissimilar to what is the principle of using pharmaceutical products. You do preclinical work from aerosol characterization of these products to in vitro, in vivo, and then once you feel comfortable, you do human trials, and you characterize the entire evidence you have that these products are better than cigarettes. Then we have to, in the US, for example, there is a very clear process. You have to submit all your scientific evidence, including population models and also studies on the intended audiences, that you have quite a high level of assurance that this product will do what it promises, and then once they are authorized to be in the market, then you have to have a different set of rules of how you market them, to whom you communicate, and to measure that we have the right effect on the intended audiences and minimize, if any, the effect on the unintended. That requires marketing restrictions, access restrictions. Now, let me answer it directly. That's the process, and that's what the FDA is doing. Now, e-vapor products were exempt for a period of time from this process in the US, and now, as of May this year, every e-vapor product has to go through this process.
Right.
Now, we also have to differentiate two things that happen quite simultaneously. The one is something that should have not happened, the overall increase of nicotine use via e-vapor products by youth, and that's a serious problem that needs to be addressed, and we can come to this. And the other is the unfortunate situation of deaths and disease in lungs that we had by the use not of traditional e-vapor products, but by adding to open systems oils or e-vitamin that are fats, and in very simple terms, if you inhale fats, your lungs cannot dissolve them, and you create disease. But we had conflation of factors here. There is a real issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Could I just separate those two
and
out?
a non-issue relating to the traditional e-vapor.
Right, and I want to separate those two things out because that's a really important distinction. Let's take the first one, really. Is it inevitable that we have to try to strike a balance between, on the one hand, helping adults who have been smoking cigarettes flip over to things like vaping, which is clearly healthier for them, but the trade-off is we will have more and more adolescents who become addicted to nicotine through vaping? Because that is, so far, I think, is a fair description of what is happening in the United States of America.
This is what happened, but this is not what should happen. I think there are means to minimize use of these products by youth, from age limits to purchase the products, and there is discussion now in the US to increase the age limit to 21, to access control at the various points of sale, be it physical or e-commerce, with age verification, to education in the schools that we told teenagers you should not smoke. We should tell them now don't use any nicotine product, and eventually technology that can activate the device, be it any vapor or heated tobacco product or whatever, only after age verification. And I think all these measures are feasible, so we can minimize to the maximum any access of the youth to these products, and maximize on the other side the switching of people out of cigarettes to the alternative products. But that can be done only in collaboration with the agency, and this is precisely the process the FDA has put in place. What happened is that e-vapor category got exempt, and with marketing freedoms that were essentially free for all. And that's why this product should be regulated. So I think the product is addressable, and you're right in saying that we also have 11 million people that use e-vapor products and 35 million people that still smoke in the US. And I think we should not forget about that.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate you spending time with us. That's Philip Morris International CEO Andrei Kolotsopoulos joining us today from Davos, Switzerland. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Financial leaders enjoy talking with...
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down, of course, in a used container, and then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren-Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We're 11 days now away from the Iowa caucuses, and we have a four-way race for the Democratic nomination that is too close and way too early to call. But here to set the stage for where things stand is Rick Davis. He's Bloomberg political contributor and the man who ran Senator John McCain's campaign for president in 2008, as well as Jim Messina. He's founder and CEO of the Messina Group, and Jim ran President Obama's re-election campaign in 2012 and then went on to be his deputy chief of staff in the White House. So an all-star panel here. As I say, it's way too soon to tell, but it doesn't keep us from talking about it, right? So, Rick, you start first. Where are we in the Democratic race right now from where you sit?
Well, look, I mean, we're right to the home stretch in one of the most important events of the year. The Iowa caucuses is always a winnowing process. Somebody's going to want to win this thing like nobody's business. And frankly, two of the front runners are sitting in impeachment hearings in Washington, D.C., while the other two pretenders to the throne of Iowa are hustling hard, 6 events a day, and trying to take advantage of the open field that they got to run in.
So Jim, I'm curious, is it a four-way race? Because I said it was, but the most recent poll that I saw actually had Klobuchar moving up. I mean, just behind Sanders, but only by 4 points or so.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I think winnowing is the word Rick used, and it's exactly right. There's some people who absolutely have to perform in Iowa and New Hampshire, and Amy Klobuchar is one of those, right? If she can't win, place, or show, you know, she's in real trouble. If you're Mayor Pete and you can't have a big moment, you're in real trouble. And so I think, you know, this winnowing is going to occur, and that's what Iowa and New Hampshire are going to be. Democrats have moved up their calendar to have big states in Super Tuesday. So really what Iowa and New Hampshire are going to do is give us less candidates and start to show some momentum for some new candidates.
Rick, if you're a strategist right now, is it a bifurcated race in the sense, are the moderates thinking about the moderates and the progressives thinking about the progressives? That is to say, is Elizabeth Warren focused on Bernie Sanders? Is people
focused on Democratic primary politics than I do, but I've always seen it as sort of lanes, right? And there's a lane for the sort of left progressives, there's a lane for centrists, and there are various divisions within that. But look, the caucuses are tricky, right? Because those lanes kind of break down. And much better in a primary like New Hampshire, where you can sort of look at the demographics, know who's going to turn out. Iowa is a crapshoot. Those caucuses, the precinct level, you don't know who's going to show up. You're driving hard to get anybody there, regardless of what ideology they are, or even whether or not they're Democrats. If they're an independent with a heartbeat, they're going to try and get them to a caucus.
At the same time, Jim, we're pretty late into it, relatively speaking. We've got at least 4 very viable candidates with a lot of money. I mean, they've raised a ton of money.
Well, and still a third of Iowa caucus goers say they could switch their minds in the last 11 days, right? And remember, if your candidate's not viable after the first round in the caucus, then you can go to a new candidate, right? And so then we could still have more tumult, and that's where you kind of look at some of this, and you're seeing candidates rise and fall, right? Elizabeth Warren's had a bad 10 days of polling, and at the same time, because she's in a lane with Bernie's numbers have come up, right? Mayor Pete's come down, Biden's come up. That's a very natural thing that's going to happen as we move forward.
Well, and to that point, Rick, I've seen some numbers at least that suggest that Elizabeth Warren may not be a lot of people's first choice, but she's a lot of people's second choice. She does better if you look at second choices. And there's a sort of Abraham Lincoln, as I recall, that's how he got his nomination. He wanted to be everydy's second choice. And
boy, throw Abraham Lincoln, the father of the Republican Party, into a discussion about the Democratic caucuses in Iowa. That's sacrilege. Yeah, look, this is the unique part about the Iowa caucuses is second, third choices matter. As the night goes on, your candidate falls out. I mean, if Pete winds up in fourth and his voters are looking for a place to be a winner, where do they go? And, of course, all the campaigns know this, right? And so they've got their data working overtime saying, okay, what's your first choice? There's no such thing as who are you for. It's who are you for and how strongly you believe in it and who else would you be willing to vote for. And that's when the fun begins. It'll be a late night in Iowa. I mean, there's going to be a lot of changing. This is a unique Iowa caucus because you really do have 4, maybe 5 people all vying for contention. Usually this field is cleared a little bit by now.
Interesting. And then how much do they have to keep their eyes on New Hampshire? I mean, they can't just be thinking about Iowa.
And South Carolina, right?
And South Carolina,
and
Nevada.
remember that 3 days after the New Hampshire primary, early ballots go out in California and Texas.
Wow.
And so this thing is going to get really, really sped up. And it's costing the two things that campaigns don't have, time and money, right? And that's what the concern, if you're in our old jobs running these presidential campaigns, you're starting to look at that bank account and that calendar and saying, hey, we're running out of both.
And can you imagine, you've spent years getting ready if you're Bernie and for Iowa, and now you have to sit in the United States Senate and keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that some more over on the radio, actually. Many thanks to Rick Davis and Jim Messina. They will be sticking with us over on Bloomberg Radio for the next hour. And the World Health Organization is currently holding a news conference on the coronavirus. You can watch that event on the Bloomberg. You can go to the function Live Go. Stay tuned for more Balance of Power over on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop brand continues to grow. Its latest expansion is a 6-episode Netflix series devoted to the wellness theories and practices promoted on the company's website and in its newsletter. The show focuses on the Goop staff as they test activities like yoga in the snow or try out new therapies like sampling psychedelics in the Jamaican sun. Each episode of the Goop Lab begins with a disclaimer about how they're designed to entertain and inform, not provide medical advice. One thing that needs no disclaimers whatsoever is the Audi R8 V10 Performance Coupe, writes Bloomberg car columnist Hannah Elliott. Though the $200,000 car has been only lightly updated since its last major facelift in 2012, Elliott says it remains an example of superior styling, elegant handling, and it features flawless entertainment and navigation systems. The 0 to 60 sprint time is 3.2 seconds. The car has a whopping 602 horsepower. Its top speed is 200 miles an hour. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
When you put together the puzzle that's today's business and political environment,
can you make a call given this swirl of data?
Is that already being reflected in the way that they're priced?
Make sure you have all the pieces.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction. Will he have to abide by a subpoena?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all slumping again following losses in Europe and Asia amid growing concern that a virus spreading from China could curb global growth. Treasuries climbed, crude oil dropped, the 10-year up 15.30 seconds, the yield 1.71%. West Texas Intermediate crude down another 3.2%, below $55 a barrel, $54.95. Brent 61.44. Brent crude down 2.8%. 1%. Makers of consumer goods among the biggest drags on the S&P 500 index as investors try to gauge the virus's potential impact. Reverberations also being felt in other markets, with oil now at the lowest since November. The European Central Bank has launched the first rethink of its policy since 2003, giving itself wide scope over the aspects of the assessment, but leaving investors largely in the dark on the details. Today, the European Central Bank did leave rates unchanged. Here's ECB President Christine Lagarde.
We will continue to make net purchases under our asset purchase program at a monthly pace of 20 billion euros. We expect them to run for as long as necessary to reinforce the accommodative impact of our policy rates and to end shortly before we start raising the key ECB interest rates.
Texas Instruments' fourth quarter earnings report soothed nerves on Wall Street, but was not enough to send the stock higher a day after closing at a record. Despite beating revenue estimates for the fourth quarter, it was the Dallas-based company's fifth consecutive quarter of shrinking sales. Gold up 0.6% right now, $15.67 the ounce. Again, the 10-year, the yield there 1.71%. S&P lower by 11, down by 0.4%. 102 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are falling more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 0.6%, and the S&P 500 is only lower by 0.3%. ADRs of European airlines are down on the prospect that a coronavirus outbreak in China will curtail demand for air travel. British Airways owner IAG has lost 3.9% in U.S. trading. Germany's Lufthansa has fallen 3.7%, and Air France KLM has slipped 2.6%. French automaker Renault has declined 5.2% after being lowered to sell from neutral at Citigroup. The firm said Renault may have to sell part of its 42% stake in Japan's Nissan Motor to bolster its finances. Spain's ACS has dropped 5.4%. The construction company said it would record a charge of more than $440 million because an Australian affiliate reduced the value of its stake in a Middle Eastern contractor. And Switzerland's STMicroelectronics has risen 5.3%. The chip maker's fourth quarter revenue exceeded analysts' average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. STMicro's first quarter sales forecast also beat projections, Charlie.
And we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, following those American depository receipts. Recapping, stocks lower, S&P down 11 points, a drop of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
China shuts down access to Wuhan as it tries to address the coronavirus. The trial of President Trump in the United States Senate is starting just as we speak, with the second day of the House presentation for the prosecution. And campaign managers sprint for the finish line, only 11 days away now in Iowa. From the Bloomberg Interactive's Broker Studio, we welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. Iowa caucus goers will gather 11 days from now in the first real test of the Democratic candidates for president, with the polls showing 4 candidates grouped at the top and different readings of who's ahead. Still with us are 2 veterans of battles like those in Iowa. Bloomberg contributor Rick Davis, who ran Senator John McCain's presidential campaign in 2008, and Jim Messina, who ran President Barack Obama's re-election campaign in 2012. So thank you, gentlemen, for staying with us. I have to ask both of you, what would your counterparts be doing right now today out in Iowa? If you were running the campaign out there, Rick, what would you be up to?
Well, you're meeting constantly with your field organization to make sure that organizers that you've appointed who represent your campaign all throughout the state and every county and every precinct have their instructions. They're doing all the recruitment they can. You're overseeing the media buy, the radio. your surrogates are out hitting the trail, and you've probably got your last piece of mail going out today. So those are the kind of things you're sweating right now.
Jim, in the last hour of Balance of Power, you mentioned the fact that there's a substantial percentage of the caucus goers who say they're still undecided. I'm not sure what they have to see in order to get decided, but how do you handle those people?
Well, it's why having a field organization really matters. Having relationships really matter. And in addition to the undecided voters, right, you have people who are, their candidates are not going to stay in this race past like the first ballot. They're not going to make the hurdle in some of these precincts. I'll pick on Mayor Pete's people. Let's say he doesn't get to the hurdle of 15%. His people can go to another campaign. So you're going to need to reach out to your own supporters and start reaching out to some of these other people saying, hey, if your candidate doesn't make the threshold, then come to us.
How much truth is there to this, what's often said, that the Iowa caucus goers want to see the candidates themselves. They want them in their living room. They want to talk to them. Because right now we have some senators who are stuck in that Senate chamber because there's a trial going on of President Trump. We had Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, and she was asked about this. This is what she said. She thinks she's in okay shape despite the fact she can't be there.
I have more legislators and former legislators in the state of Iowa that have endorsed me than any other candidate in the race. So that means multiple people that will be out there for me.
So, Rick Davis, does an endorsement make up for not being there?
Well, it helps. I mean, there's a whole contest to see who can get endorsements from every man, woman, and child who's elected official in the state of Iowa. I would say the point you were making about what Iowans believe their role is in this, and they take this very seriously. I mean, Jim pointed out that you've got about a third of them who haven't even made up their mind. It's not even that they've made up their mind yet. It's like they expect these candidates to come to them, make the pitch. They're going to ask them hard questions, and they've been doing it their entire lives. And these are seasoned voting professionals, right? They're used to retail politics. And so the fact that these guys, the senators, are sitting in Washington and not being able to make their closing arguments in person does have an impact on the voters themselves.
So, Jim, Rick makes a really interesting point I had not thought of before, because some of us think, I mean, really we're going to start in Iowa with a caucus? That's the best way to pick a nominee for President of the United States? But is there some genius to this system? Are the Iowa voters actually more sophisticated because they've done this time and time again, and they take it more serious and they ask good questions?
Yes, I think there is a genius to it, right? I once asked an Iowa caucus goer, are you going to vote for Obama? And she said, I don't know. He's only been to my house twice. And, they really do ask the kind of questions Rick's talking about. It really is a good system. We really can, because it's so small, go to all 99 counties in Iowa. Barack Obama went twice. John McCain went several times. And they really got to know these candidates. They got to know them in a way that a general election you're never going to do. And I think in this age of crazy spending and all this negativity, there is some genius about actually having a real discussion about the issues in Iowa for a year.
Rick, would you say that this Iowa caucus is more important to some Democratic candidates than others? Take the top four. Is it critical to any of those people? Is it less important to some?
Well, it's all about setting expectations and then meeting those expectations, right? And each of these candidates, no matter who they are, have been talking to reporters now for 6 months saying, here's what I think I need to do in Iowa. And if they then don't meet that threshold themselves, it undercuts their whole rationale for running for president. And so there's a top tier who are fighting to be number one, right? And that's always an expectation. You want the bump out of Iowa to get into New Hampshire. Some of these candidates are doing better in Iowa than they're doing in New Hampshire, and they hope that winning in Iowa will catapult them to the top of the list. And then there are others who just want to get enough of a vote in Iowa that they're still in the discussion. So when the New York Times does the analysis of who came out of Iowa, is it the fourth spot, the fifth spot? Is it like a surprise come from behind to get into the top three? Nobody really can tell you what that expectation is until you see the lineup of what happened after Election Day.
Jim Messina, there were reports early on that Joe Biden, the former vice president, had not spent a lot of time in Iowa, that he spent more time really fundraising, frankly, to a large degree on the coast, whereas the Pete Buttigieg's of this world, people like that, were really spending time out there. Can you catch up with that? I mean, is he spending more time there? Can you catch up with your ground game if you're playing from behind?
Yeah, you can, and I think the vice president's really tried to do that. He's been there really hard. He has his no malarkey Kentucky Express whipping around that state like a NASCAR on a track. And he's attempting, Biden, though, doesn't need to win Iowa. Biden just needs to stay in the race, as Rick was saying, get to South Carolina where he's a prohibitive favorite, and then Super Tuesday. You're talking about Mayor Pete, Amy Klobuchar. They have to move in Iowa. This is their moment. If they can't move in Iowa, their moment's not coming.
And is three or four good enough for Mayor Pete?
Yeah, I think it's good enough because he can, he has one thing some of the other candidates don't, which is unbelievable fundraising appeal. Yeah. He raises money online like the way Barack Obama did. Mm-hmm. And so he can stay alive in a way where Amy and other folks can't if they don't win place or show.
But David, if Amy is having a moment here in Iowa and she beats Pete in the caucuses, that is a signal, regardless of what position they are, that signals a big change in the dialogue.
Yeah, in upper Midwest.
Yep.
Which doesn't hurt. I mean, given what President Trump did last time.
Well, they're both fighting for those.
No, they are.
Folks.
Exactly.
Yep.
And they're going after the people that President Trump brought along with him in 2016.
Well, and then we haven't even talked about New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
And if Elizabeth Warren, there's a poll out today showing her in fourth, she's toast if she finishes anything other than first or second.
The state next door. That's not so good. Okay.
Not so good.
Okay. Many, many thanks to Rick Davis of Stone Court Capital and Jim Messina. He's CEO of the Messina Group. Coming up, did the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia really hack Jeff Bezos' phone? Did it really happen? We talk with Techonomy founder and CEO David Kirkpatrick. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
You're not supposed to begin the race before the starting gun, but this is a different kind of race.
Let's go live to London and get the very latest.
Karen Moscow.
Airlines could soon be under pressure.
Nathan Hager.
Apple has reversed course on Hong Kong.
Business news, interviews, and analysis first.
We get another key reading on inflation.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekdays at 5 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging...
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
This ain't just lunch. It's the KFC fill-up lunch for $1.99. It's mighty fine. Tingles your spine, so jump in line while there's still time. 1 mini fillet burger, 2 hot wings and fries, all for a fist-pumping $1.99. What the... Fill up on the fill-up lunch for only 1 more week at KFC. Every day until 26th of January until 3 p.m. at participating restaurants, subject to availability.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
The Grand DFS sale featuring Wallace.
Hello.
And Gromit.
Well, say hello, lad.
Every sofa is made to order.
By a speedy Sofa-matic machine.
By hand.
Oh, suit yourself.
So you can have your sofa exactly how you want it.
Made of cheese?
Not that exactly.
Oh, probably a good thing, eh, Gromit? It'd be gone in a jiffy.
The Grand DFS sale is now on.
How about a cushion made of cheese? Or a footstool?
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We begin with this headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service. Sources tell Bloomberg Wells Fargo's main regulator, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, is preparing civil charges against former managers relating to their roles in its retail banking scandals. Wells Fargo shares, they're down 0.7%. It is a down day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Stocks are slumping with oil. Bonds are climbing on virus fears. The 10-year up 13/30 seconds at yield 1.72%. Equities lower across the board with the S&P down 10, down 0.3%. The Dow is down 135 points, down 0.5, and NASDAQ down 18, a drop of 0.2%. Gold up 0.6%, 15.67 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude tumbling 3.2%, now at 54.94 a barrel. Brent's at 61.42, down 2.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much to Charlie Pellet. From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. An incendiary report in The Guardian has triggered calls for an international investigation. The claim, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia sent a private message, it was a WhatsApp message actually, to Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and that message included code that led to a massive unauthorized export of data from the Bezos phone. To take us through what we know about the story, we welcome now David Kirkpatrick, founder and CEO of Techonomy Media, and he's joining us today from Davos, Switzerland. So thank you so much for joining us, David. Tell us what we do know. This seems like it's just a perfectly wild story.
Well, it's a story that converges a number of important stories. Interesting, you mentioned on the Davos, the technology talk here, one of the major issues is cybersecurity. It's a growing concern to everybody. And one of the reasons for that